Chapter 2038. Pay respects to your new master, Little Tortoise. Powerful. Witnessing such a scene, Pavilion Master Kue Xiao and Elder Feng felt their bodies turning cold. They could not help but imagine themselves being in the same position as Bai Shensheng. They had been confident in their ploy against the blackback tortoise, especially since they had devoted many resources and spent months preparing for it. They had thought that with all they had done, it should not have been too difficult for them to capture the blackback tortoise. However, little did they know that the other party was simply going along with them in order to lure them into its trap. Honestly, Citadel Lord Bai Shensheng was truly a formidable cultivator. If not for the aid of the silverback mayflies, there was no doubt that the victor of the duel would have been Bai Shensheng. However, the environment always played a key factor in the outcome of a battle. Bai Shensheng failed to take this into consideration, so he ended up landing himself in such a tragic state within a few blows. Had Elder Liu not seen through the blackback tortoise's ploy in advance, they would have charged right into the trap and ended up in the same position as Bai Shensheng, or perhaps even worse. Hong Long. Even after successfully launching a powerful attack, the blackback tortoise did not let down its guard. Instead, it dived back into his tortoise shell and continued ramming toward Bai Shensheng. "Till kill you." For the roles of the hunter and the hunted to be reversed all of a sudden, Bai Shensheng was incredibly indignant. With a ferocious roar, he brought out 3 swords and drove them forward. As expected of the head of the Black Mirror Citadel, the 3 swords were all at heavenly high immortal tier. Ding ding ding! The swords clashed against the shell of the blackback tortoise, but they did not even leave a scratch or hinder its speed at all. Bai Shensheng narrowed his eyes. In the face of such a situation, what choice did he have other than to turn tail and flee? He had lost his semi-divinity artifact, his arms and ribcage were fractured, and his innards were jolted. If this continued, he would die for sure. Boom! Before Bai Shensheng could get far, the blackback tortoise struck his back once more, smashing him all the way into the ground. "We have to make a move right now," Zhong Xian remarked as he released the spatial formation and rushed out. Pavilion Master Kue Xiao and Elder Feng, who had been watching the situation intently, quickly dashed out from their hiding spots. They knew that Bai Shensheng would really lose his life if they continued biding their time. The 7-star pavilion was not close with the Black Mirror Citadel, but they had no intention of letting Bai Shensheng die like that, especially given the recent movements from the Hall of Gods. The blackback tortoise immediately noticed the presence of Zhong Xian and the others, but it did not rush into making a move. Instead, it waited patiently to see what they were up to. "Pavilion Master Kue, we'll be counting on you," Zhong Xian said. "Yuan, don't worry." Pavilion Master Kue Xiao nodded as he charged forward as if a bolt of lightning. He swiftly channeled of his energy in his palm, generating a surge of energy so immense that the surrounding water began bubbling non-stop. All the silverback mayflies that were gathered around the blackback tortoise immediately dissipated into ashes under the outpour of energy. On the way to the Sea of Exiled Stars, in repayment for helping him achieve a breakthrough, Zhong Xian had given Pavilion Master Kue Xiao and the others some pointers on their battle techniques. Even though it had only been a few short days, they managed to make massive advancements in their fighting prowess. It was the same bolting lightning clutching clouds as before, but it was at least 2 times stronger. Lightning crackled from his hands, making it seem as if he was the god of thunder. Sensing danger, the blackback tortoise immediately retracted its body back into its shell and revolved its body. As a result, the lightning in Pavilion Master Kue Xiao's hands simply scorched the surface of the shell before being deflected away. The attack had failed to inflict any internal injuries to the blackback tortoise. "That tortoise is formidable," Zhong Xian murmured. Not only was it fast, it also possessed a massive tortoise shell that allowed it to easily deflect any sharp strikes. Pavilion Master Kue Xiao was not weak by any means, but it was apparent that even he was having trouble trying to hurt the latter. In the blink of an eye, those two had already exchanged more than 10 blows. The sheer might from their confrontation caused the Sea of Little Mirror to boil up. Steam rose endlessly from the surface of the water. The shockwaves from the duel between 2 semi-divinity realm experts were more than enough to destroy everything within a radius of 10,000 li. If not for the fact that they were underwater, this battle would have drawn many experts to the area. Spectating the battle in wonderment from the side, Elder Feng could not help noticing a peculiar detail, and a frown formed on his forehead. He turned to Zhongxian and asked, "Why doesn't the blackback tortoise use its ram against Pavilion Master Kuei?" When the blackback tortoise was fighting with Bai Shensheng earlier, it had relied heavily on its powerful rams in order to cripple the latter. Yet, when faced with Pavilion Master Kuei Xiao, it seemed to be taking a more passive role in the battle, primarily focusing on defending against the other party's attack. It's apprehensive of the double ripples water formation, so it doesn't dare make a reckless move, Zhongxian said with a light chuckle. Elder Feng widened his eyes as he came to a realization. The blackback tortoise was truly a wary individual. The area where it moved around throughout the battle had been outside the perimeter of the formation, such that the formation would not be able to hurt it even if they activated it now. No, that's not right. Wasn't it waiting for the double ripples water formation to activate earlier to trap Citadel Lord Bai so that it could kill him? Doesn't that mean that it isn't afraid of the formation? Elder Feng asked. Well, the situation is slightly different now. It might still have been able to squander its energy carelessly earlier, but it can't afford to do so anymore, Zhongxian replied. Those words made Elder Feng frown. This huge fellow had simply been ramming its humongous body around, not bothering to use its zhenqi or any of its other talents. It should have plenty of strength left in it, so why did Elder Liu make it sound as if it was already in a drained state? Those silverback mayflies are capable of rendering even a semi-divinity artifact powerless. It's true that the blackback tortoise's defense is impressive, but do you really think that it wouldn't suffer any damage when it has been the main target of the silverback mayflies throughout the battle? Zhongxian asked. Even at this moment, there were still plenty of silverback mayflies attached to the body of the blackback tortoise. Considering how they were able to bring down a semi-divinity artifact, it was impossible for the blackback tortoise to be completely unaffected by them even with its powerful defense. Since that's the case, why don't we join in the battle too? Hearing that the blackback tortoise was swiftly getting worn down, Elder Feng heaved a sigh of relief as a glint flashed across his eyes. Zhongxian waved his hand and said, "No rush. Since it's biding its time, we should do the same." Having complete trust in the young man, Elder Feng did not question his judgment and continued spectating the battle. During this period, Pavilion Master Kuei Xiao and the blackback tortoise exchanged another 20 blows. The former's offense had clearly become a little wearied, lacking the ferocious aggression from before. Similarly, the latter seemed to be extremely exhausted, taking in large breaths of air. At this moment, the blackback tortoise opened its mouth once more. "Who?" The diamond crystal that had done in by Shensheng earlier flew out from its mouth and headed right toward where Pavilion Master Kuei Xiao was. Humph. There was no way Pavilion Master Kuei Xiao would not be guarded against this move after witnessing what had happened to Bai Shensheng, but just as he was able to dodge to the side, a shadow suddenly appeared in front of him. "Don't dodge it." It was Zhongxian. With a light smile, he reached forward and grabbed the diamond crystal. "Who?" The diamond crystal immediately vanished from sight. He had thrown it into his storage ring. This time, Pavilion Master Kuei Xiao was not the only one who was taken aback by the situation. Even the blackback tortoise was visibly stunned. The reason it had endured so many blows was to wait for an opportunity to toss the diamond crystal toward its enemy, but who could have known that this fellow would suddenly appear from nowhere to throw it into his storage ring? This was no ordinary diamond crystal. It harnessed a tremendous amount of energy, producing light that could even be seen from 10,000 li away. How could the storage ring possibly not explode from something like that? If it was possible for them to keep it with a storage ring, they would have already done so. Why would they bother going through so much trouble to dodge to the side? Seeing through the blackback tortoise's bewilderment, Zhongxian asked with a smile, "Are you wondering why I am able to keep this diamond crystal in my storage ring?" With a flick of his wrist, the diamond crystal immediately materialized above his hand, floating quietly in the air. What? The blackback tortoise widened its eyes in disbelief. "You actually managed to tame the diamond crystal?" In order to make use of the power of the diamond crystal to lure the silverback mayflies, it had burned its blood essence after swallowing the diamond crystal in order to forcefully tame it. But in the blink of an eye, The diamond crystal had become another person's property. While the diamond crystal was not a weapon, something of its tier was bound to already possess its own spirit. Once it had pledged loyalty to a master, unless its master died, it would never switch allegiance. Just what in the world did the young man do? I did. I killed the spirit in the diamond crystal and re-enchanted a new one. Naturally, who else would the new spirit submit to other than me? Zhongxian replied calmly. Then, he flicked his finger. Wang. The diamond crystal flew right toward the blackback tortoise before glowing even brighter than before. Hula. The agitated silverback mayflies immediately rushed over and encircled the blackback tortoise tightly. I underestimated you lot, the blackback tortoise said as it stared deeply at Zhongxian. Without any hesitation, it turned around to flee. Its initial plan had been to take down Pavilion Master Kue Xiao as well, and by devouring the two of them, it would have been able to raise its cultivation. However, its plan had been foiled by this young man. At this very moment, its energy was nearly entirely depleted, so it had no choice but to flee for the time being. Don't you think that it's too late for you to think about leaving only now? Zhongxian remarked as he took a step forward. Wang. The billowing sea immediately quietened down, as if it had been sealed by some kind of power. Even the rampaging silverback mayflies had fallen silent. Shocked, the blackback tortoise quickly picked up speed to ram its way outward, but it was swiftly rebounded by some sort of barrier. Its face turned livid as it uttered in disbelief, "What kind of formation is this? How can it be so powerful?" It had made sure to examine the area carefully before, and it was certain that the formation that had been prepared for it was the double ripples water formation. While that formation was able to trap it for a brief moment, as long as it charged its way out desperately with all of its might, it would still be able to make a safe getaway. So, what the hell was this? He had actually been rebounded by the barrier even though he had already put all of his strength behind the collision. What kind of formation was this? All formations would require energy to sustain them. There were no clear pulsations of energy in the area, so how was such a resilient barrier formed? The double ripples water formation is just an ordinary confinement formation. It wouldn't have been able to trap you. So, I made some modifications to it, expanding its area and prowess. All this while, the formation has been absorbing the energy released by the three semi-divinity realm fighting here. For this reason, unless I release this formation personally, it'll be no different from three semi-divinity realm experts blocking your pathway. You don't stand a chance at all, Zhongxian explained. Since the formation that Elder Feng had prepared was insufficient, he had no choice but to modify it slightly. The main reason he had not interfered in the fight so far was to allow the formation to gather more energy, such that it would reach a level where the blackback tortoise was no longer able to breach the barrier. Only with this would they be able to hold the swift blackback tortoise there. The formation has been absorbing our released energy. Who the hell are you? The blackback tortoise tried a few more times, but it was just as Zhongxian had said. Even if it was at its full strength, it still would not have been able to breach the barrier. Knowing that it did not stand a chance at all, its face turned extremely livid. The cultivation of the young man before it was not too high, but he was able to tame the diamond crystal and set up such a powerful formation. It was as if he was the true mastermind pulling the strings behind the scenes, and everything had gone according to his calculations. Just who in the world was this person? The blackback tortoise was still thinking that it would be able to make its name through this battle in the Sea of Little Mirror so that no humans would dare disturb it anymore, but after all the scheming that had gone around, it had still ended up being done in. You want to know who I am? Zhongxian looked at it and smiled. Little tortoise, acknowledge me as your master. Acknowledge me as our master, and I'll tell you who I am. Chapter 2039. Are you willing to become our sect leader? Acknowledge him as its master. Elder Liu intends to tame the blackback tortoise. Pavilion Master Kue Xiao and Elder Feng looked at one another in horror. Semi-divinity realm beasts were incredibly proud. Even after all the preparation they had done, they dared not think that it would be possible for them to tame the blackback tortoise. Moreover, why would the other party submit just because it was told to do so? Even if Hall Master Zheng Yang from the Myriads Beasts Hall was there personally, There was also no guarantee that he would be able to tame the blackback tortoise. Just as they had guessed, as soon as it heard Zhongxian's words, the blackback tortoise's face immediately darkened. Reminiscent of a volcano on the verge of an explosion, it spat, "You want me to acknowledge you as my master? You'll first have to prove yourself." Boom! With a roar, it charged right toward Zhongxian furiously. Seal. Without taking even a step, Zhongxian tapped his finger lightly. Hula. Energy swiftly gathered within the formation, pinning the humongous blackback tortoise down. As if a fish in frozen water, no matter how it struggled, it was unable to break free. "Submit to me or face death," Zhongxian said after sealing the blackback tortoise's movements. "Kill me if you can." The blackback tortoise scoffed as it dived back into its shell. As a semi-divinity realm beast, its shell was comparable to that of a semi-divinity artifact, making it nigh indestructible. As long as it were to hole itself inside its shell, there was nothing the other party could do after trapping it. Semi-divinity realm beasts had their own pride and honor. How could it possibly acknowledge a human so much weaker than itself as its master? Not to mention, the formation that was trapping him had to be sustained with sufficient energy. As long as it held on for long enough, the formation would collapse on its own, allowing it to get away. "Do you think that I'm helpless against you just like that?" Zhongxian had long guessed that the blackback tortoise would make such a move, so he clapped his hands and said, "Little chick, it's your turn to receive our guess." Coming. The little yellow chick waddled its way out. Pavilion Master Kuei Xiao and Elder Feng blinked. Were they seeing thing? A heavenly high immortal realm little yellow chick. It was true that the cultivation of the chick was not too low, but it was only the size of a palm. What could it possibly do against the blackback tortoise? Paying no heed to their shock, little chick waddled its way up the back of the blackback tortoise, but after climbing for a long while, a water current suddenly swept it off its feet, causing it to fall off. It had to hurriedly flap its thumb-sized wings desperately before finally getting back on. The same thing happened a couple more times. Pavilion Master Kuei Xiao and Elder Feng were literally tearing clumps of hair out. Was this little creature really capable of dealing with the semi-divinity realm blackback tortoise? What a joke! Cooped in its shell, the blackback tortoise also secretly peeked out from its shell, and it was stunned when it saw a little yellow chick climbing up its shell. "You can try to tame me, but you can't insult me. No matter what, I'm still a semi-divinity realm beast, one of the strongest existences on the Forsaken Continent. Even those two semi-divinity realm experts ruling over 2 of the 6 sects are no match for me. There are so many ways you could have used to attempt to tame me, but you actually brought me a chick instead. It would be one thing if it was a really hot chick that would still come under the art of seduction, but what the heck is this? The hell, who brings out a real chick in battle?" The blackback tortoise was stifled. If not for the fact that it was in a weakened state and was unable to breach the seal, it would have rammed the fool who dared use such a strategy against it through the 18 levels of hell. Meanwhile, little chick continued falling a few times, and eventually, it gave in. It turned to Zhongxian and yelled, "Don't you know that chicks are bad in water? Instead of standing there like a fool, why don't you come over and help?" "Zhongxian, didn't you swim perfectly well in boiling water the last few times?" Mentally reminding himself that it was futile to bicker with an idiot, he walked up, grabbed the little yellow chick by its neck, and threw it upward. "Go! Hu! Piang!" Little chick crashed on top of the back of the blackback tortoise and rolled off a little. "Hurry up and make your move," Zhongxian said. "Rest assured, leave it all to me." Little chick nodded. Standing atop the 100-meter-wide tortoiseshell, it abruptly opened its tiny mouth. Hu! Its fingernail-sized mouth opened several 100 meters wide and chomped down on the massive tortoiseshell, swallowing it whole. It formed a bizarre sight. It was as if yellow fur had grown all over the tortoiseshell instead. "There, I'm done." The little yellow chick fluttered its tiny wings triumphantly. "What are you doing? I'm telling you to help me tame it. Why are you swallowing it instead?" Zhongxian was rendered speechless. This fellow sure was unreliable. "I needed you to help me scare it into submission, not swallow it whole. What do I have to gain from having it eaten by you?" He quickly leaped up to the head of the inflated little chick and smacked it. "Spit it out." Now. All right, all right. Little Chick harumphed indignantly as it spat out the blackback tortoise. By this moment, the massive blackback tortoise was already on the verge of dying. It stuck its head out from its shell with a dazed look on its face. Who am I? Where am I? Submit to me, Zhongxian ordered. Those words immediately snapped the blackback tortoise out of its daze. With an indignant look, it roared, "You're dreaming." Fine. Zhongxian turned to Little Chick and said, "You can continue eating it." So, the little yellow chick opened its mouth wide once more. Wait. I'll submit to you, the blackback tortoise cried out desperately. It had no choice but to submit. It did not fear death, but if others learned that it had been eaten by this little chick, the imposing reputation that it had built up over the years would really go to ruins. That's more like it. Zhongxian nodded in satisfaction as he quickly carried out the acknowledgement ritual. Seeing this, Pavilion Master Kue Xiao and Elder Feng widened their mouths in disbelief. It was tamed just like that. Was that little yellow chick really so formidable? They had honestly thought that the young man had brought out the little chick in order to discuss the blackback tortoise, but who could have known that such a small creature would actually have the capacity to swallow the massive blackback tortoise? That should have been physically impossible, and now that they thought about it, could this little chick be the reason that the young man had been able to snatch away by Xuancheng's semi-divinity metal chain earlier? Zhongxian heaved a sigh of relief after the soul contract had been sealed. He took a look at the blackback tortoise and said, "You are too big at the moment. Make yourself smaller." "Yes, master." The blackback tortoise immediately contracted its body until it was around 2 meters in diameter. Zhongxian waved his hand and took out a few bottles of chicken soup. "Drink this." The blackback tortoise dared not to disobey its master's orders. It immediately swallowed the chicken soup, and a moment later, its eyes widened in bewilderment. In truth, it had been in a terrible state from the prolonged battle. The continuous ramming had taken a toll on it, causing it to sustain severe internal injuries. Furthermore, the continuous attacks from the silverback mayflies had caused significant damage. It had never thought that it would be able to recover in an instant just by drinking a few bottles of chicken soup. It could almost feel vitality gushing through its body. It was really the chicken soup of life. Could the little yellow chick be a divine beast? Could my master actually be a god? The gaze that the blackback tortoise looked at its master with was different from before. The initial reason it chose to submit was because it thought that it would be much more humiliating for it to die at the hands of a chick than to submit to a human, but right now, it realized that there was more to this young man. The fact that the little yellow chick was able to swallow it so easily meant that it was no ordinary heavenly high immortal. In terms of abilities, the other party definitely far surpassed him. Considering how it was already at the semi-divinity realm, any beings that were so much stronger than it could only be true divine beasts. The fact that its master was able to tame a divine beast, even though it might still be young at the moment, meant that he was no ordinary human. Paying no heed to the shocked blackback tortoise, Zhongxian leaped down to the seabed and held the 3 heavenly high immortal tier swords that Bai Shenxing had brought out earlier between his fingers and flicked them several times. A moment later, a metallic reverberation echoed from their bodies, reminiscent of cries of pleasure. Those 3 swords had submitted to him. Who? He stowed them into the storage ring. After that was done, he took out a tamed beast sack and moved the blackback tortoise and little chick into it. Then, he turned to Pavilion Master Kue Xiao and said, "This diamond crystal is something you paid a heavy price to acquire. I'll return it to you now." While he did play a vital part in ensuring the success of the hunt, he still felt guilty about cutting in line to tame the blackback tortoise. On the other hand, however, he was planning on leaving the blackback tortoise to guard the 7-star pavilion after he left the Azure, and that would definitely be much more beneficial to the 7-star pavilion. After all, no amount of money could possibly buy one semi-divinity realm guardian. That being said, he would feel guilty about taking away the diamond crystal given its sheer value, so he chose to return it. Receiving the diamond crystal, Pavilion Master Kue Xiao's face reddened a little. He had been confident in his strength and the operation he had planned. He had thought that it would be easy for him to slay the blackback tortoise, but little did he know that he would almost lose his life there. On the other hand, the young man before him had used only a single formation and a chick, and he had easily tamed the blackback tortoise. It seemed like he had severely underestimated the prowess of this young man. "How should we deal with Citadel Lord Bai?" Zhong Xian asked. Bai Xiansheng was still lying unconscious amid the mud of the seabed. He had sustained far too severe injuries from the ramming of the blackback tortoise to recover in a moment's time. If he finds out that we have tamed the blackback tortoise, the relationship between the two sects would surely sour. "We should just leave right now," Pavilion Master Kue Xiao said. They had only appeared after Bai Xiansheng was knocked out, which meant that the latter should not know that they were involved in the matter. No matter what, the Black Mirror Citadel was still a trading partner of the Seven-Star Pavilion, so it would not be good to fall out with them. Not to mention they had taken away Bai Xuansheng's semi-divinity artifact. If the latter demanded it after he awoke, they would be placed in a dilemma. Since that was the case, they might as well quickly evacuate the area. "Leave right now?" Zhong Xian thought deeply for a moment before walking over to Bai Xuansheng's side. He plucked the other party out from the mud and took his storage ring off. "Who dares to?" Bai Xiansheng was jolted awake by someone taking away his storage ring, and he immediately bellowed furiously. But before he could even open his eyes, he felt a sharp pain at the back of his head. "Putong!" He fainted once more. Zhong Xian retracted his palm calmly. With the storage ring in hand, he leaped over to Pavilion Master Kue Xiao's side and said, "Let's go." Considering how this fellow was able to casually bring out a semi-divinity artifact and 3 heavenly high immortal tier swords, there was no doubt that he was extremely wealthy. It would be a pity to leave such drops lying around. This. Pavilion Master Kue Xiao shook his head helplessly. He did not think that Zhong Xian would be so greedy. Eventually, he held himself back from saying anything. Together, the 3 of them swam to the surface of the water. As they left the Sea of Little Mirror, they noticed a full moon reflected on the silvery surface of the water, and they could not help but feel a cold chill. Those mirror-like silverback mayflies were insignificant creatures in their eyes, but who could have known that they would actually be so frighteningly powerful? In armies, they could take down even a semi-divinity artifact without any issues. If not for the young man beside them discovering it in advance, they might have ended up in Bai Xuansheng's position, or perhaps, even on their way to meet their maker. As such thoughts flashed through their minds, they could not help but glance at the young man beside them. Pavilion Master Kue Xiao turned to Elder Feng and asked, "What do you think?" "He has far surpassed my expectations." Elder Feng nodded. "I'm willing to submit to him." "Good," Pavilion Master Kue Xiao replied with a smile. Following which, he turned to Zhong Xian and said, "Elder Liu, I have a request to ask of you." Zhong Xian frowned slightly in response. "May I know if you are willing to take over my position as the head of our 7-star pavilion?" Chapter 2040 Vacancy. Not expecting such a request, Zhong Xian was taken aback for a moment before hurriedly shaking his head. "My apologies, but I'm too used to wandering the lands. I'm afraid that I don't have the capability to become the head of the 7-star pavilion." It was not that he was uninterested in becoming the pavilion master. The 7-star pavilion was known to be the richest organization on Forsaken Continent after all, but he was already the head of the Myriad Beasts Hall, and it would be inappropriate for him to take on another leadership position in the 7-star pavilion. That definitely isn't the case. If you are lacking in capability, then I should be utterly ashamed of myself, Pavilion Master Kue Xiao replied bitterly. A strong leader was integral to a powerful organization. Considering how the young man was able to tame the blackback tortoise easily, there was really no candidate more suitable than him. "Elder Liu, I humbly beseech you to lead our 7-star pavilion." Elder Feng clasped his fist as well. This. Zhong Xian was conflicted. First the Myriad Beasts Hall, and now, even the 7-star pavilion was acting in such a manner. Why was it so difficult for him to be an ordinary elder? Was it his fault that he was so outstanding? Thinking about it, the Ascendant Cloud Sword Pavilion was still the best of all. He could just remain an innocent honorary elder, unburdened by the weight of an entire sect. Noting Zhong Xian's hesitation, Pavilion Master Kue Xiao pressed on. There's a limit to the lifespan of semi-divinity realm cultivators, so I won't be able to protect the 7-star pavilion for too long. However, semi-divinity realm beasts are known for their longevity. This is especially so for the blackback tortoise, which is rumored to be able to live for several thousand years. If you become the sect leader and leave the blackback tortoise to guard our sect, we won't have to worry about our security for the next several thousand years. Hearing those words, Zhongxian nodded. The azure was nothing more than a pit stop for him. It was only a matter of time before he approached the Hall of Gods in search of Luo Ruoxin. In the first place, he was already planning to leave the blackback tortoise behind to guard the 7-star pavilion. After all, he was indebted to the 7-star pavilion for all their help. With such thoughts in mind, Zhongxian pondered for a moment before nodding. I don't mind becoming the sect leader, but I am too used to living a carefree life. I won't be getting too involved with the affairs of the Sev-Carat Pavilion. There isn't a problem with that. The role of the sect leader is just to serve as a strong front to deter aggressors. You can leave the affairs of the sect to the first elder. Pavilion Master Kue Xiao's eyes lit up after hearing Zhongxian's agreement, and he laughed heartily in response. Elder Feng brought out the boat once more, and the three of them quickly got on it and headed back to Starchaser Island. Sometime later, Zhongxian arrived back at his accommodation in the 7-star pavilion's branch. He brought the blackback tortoise out from his tamed beast sack and had it let out some of its blood for him. Then, he sat down cross-legged on the floor and absorbed a droplet of the blackback tortoise's blood into his body. Tzzzzzzzzzzzzzz. As soon as the droplet of blood entered his body, Zhongxian could feel all his muscles coming to life. A terrifying surge of energy gushed through his meridians and gathered in his dantian. With a reddened face, he hurriedly drove his zhenqi to assimilate the energy. This won't work. Without a high immortal realm cultivation technique, it won't matter no matter how much energy I absorb. He had thought that even without a cultivation technique, he would still be able to force a breakthrough by gathering sufficient energy via the energy in the blood of the semi-divinity realm beast. However, that was easier said than done. It was likely that he would first explode into bits before he could even raise his cultivation. Since I'm unable to raise my cultivation, I should nourish my body. Knowing that it was futile to raise his zhenqi cultivation in such a manner, he could only turn his attention to something else. The blackback tortoise was known for its defense, and its blood essence and extremely useful in nourishing one's body. Controlling the energy from the blood droplet through his meridians, his physical body swiftly grew stronger. 2 hours later, the might of his physical body could already rival that of heavenly high immortals. Heaving a sigh of relief, Zhongxian took out the semi-divinity metal chain from his storage ring next. With the threat of the little yellow chick and him pointing out the flaws reflected in the library of Heaven's Path, it did not take long before Zhongxian managed to tame it as well. You are called Little Tortoise, and you are called Metal Chain. Zhongxian formally announced the names of the two semi-divinities. A certain Little Tortoise. A certain Metal Chain. After all that was done, Zhongxian let the serpentine dragon and the others out. This is the blood essence of a semi-divinity realm beast. Each of you will have 10 droplets each. Whether you will be able to make a breakthrough or not is up to your capability, Zhongxian said as he flicked the blood essence of the blackback tortoise over to them. Those few beasts had all reached the heavenly high immortal realm, and their bloodlines were extremely powerful. If they consumed the blood essence of a semi-divinity realm beast, they might be able to take another step forward. It would be best if they could make a breakthrough, but otherwise, there was no huge loss. The serpentine dragon, 9-headed fiery phoenix, and the others quickly bowed their heads in gratitude as they swallowed the blood essences. 4 hours later, they managed to advance their cultivation significantly, but they were still unable to overcome the final bottleneck limiting them. It seemed like it was not that easy to reach the semi-divinity realm after all, or else there would not have been so few of such experts in the world. Seeing that they had reached their limits, Zhongxian returned them to the tamed beast sack before taking the blackback tortoise out once more. I want you to recount to me how you were able to achieve a breakthrough to the semi-divinity realm and where you managed to do it, Zhongxian instructed. This was the primary reason he had chosen to tame the blackback tortoise instead of killing it. Ever since he learned the details surrounding the Godblood rock, he had been wondering if it had anything to do with Luo Ruoxin. I achieved a breakthrough over in the vacant sea, the blackback tortoise revealed. Vacant sea? UN. It's roughly 2 million li away from here. It's an empty region of the ocean. There are no islands or humans in the area, and that's where it got its name from, the blackback tortoise explained. It's far away. Zhong Xian frowned. How did you manage to achieve a breakthrough then? Based on what I know, only those have challenged the Azure Bridge are able to make a breakthrough to the semi-divinity realm. It's true that it's impossible for those who haven't challenged the Azure Bridge to reach the semi-divinity realm, but 2 months ago, I unintentionally swallowed a droplet of fresh blood, and before I knew it, I'd already reached the semi-divinity realm. A droplet of fresh blood? Zhong Xian clenched his fists tightly together. A semi-divinity realm expert was conducting some kind of ritual above the vacant sea, and shortly after, a crack appeared in the sky, and a figure fell down. That figure seemed to be injured, and fresh blood was dripping from her body onto the surface of the sea. I and a few other heavenly high immortal realm beasts drank her blood and successfully reached the semi-divinity realm shortly after. The blackback tortoise quickly went through his story. A figure. What did that figure look like? Do you know where she went afterward? Zhong Xian asked anxiously. She's a young lady. I wasn't able to catch a clear glimpse of her appearance, and I'm not too sure where she went. After drinking her blood, I immediately fainted from the sheer energy it harnessed. When I came to, I was already at the semi-divinity realm. To be honest, I'm not too sure how it happened either, the blackback tortoise replied awkwardly. Only some time after reaching the semi-divinity realm did it deduce that it had something to do with the young lady who had appeared from the sky that day. Most likely, she was a true god. That would explain why her blood harnessed so much power, allowing it and a few other semi-divinity realm beasts to successfully make a breakthrough. Does she look like this? Zhong Xian quickly flicked his finger and drew out Luo Ruoxin's portrait in midair. I can't remember anymore. The blackback tortoise shook its head. For some reason, my memories of her are a little hazy. It distinctly remembered seeing the young lady descending from the sky, but other than her gender, somehow, it was unable to recall her appearance, physique, or anything else. Its mind would simply draw a blank each time it tried to think about it. Most likely, that was the doing of the young lady. Zhong Xian erased the portraits and instructed, "Take me over to the vacant sea you spoke of." The blackback tortoise was horrified. It quickly explained, there were a few more semi-divinity realm beasts who achieved a breakthrough that day. It's very dangerous to head over there right now. It might have managed to achieve a breakthrough to the semi-divinity realm, but it was well aware that it was not the strongest in the vacant sea. Those who had swallowed more blood that day were much stronger than it, which was also why it had swiftly left the region after regaining consciousness. It would be too dangerous to head over there. I understand your concerns, but this is a trip that I have to make, Zhong Xian said firmly. Without a doubt, what had allowed the blackback tortoise to achieve a breakthrough was the blood of a god. The incident had happened 2 months ago, which translated to roughly 600 days on the Master-Teacher continent. It matched the time that he first met Luo Ruoxin. There was a good chance that the god who had descended from the sky was Luo Ruoxin. However, he would only be able to verify it if he headed over personally. Seeing that its master's mind was made up, the blackback tortoise thought about the little yellow chick and the semi-divinity artifact in its master's possession, and it felt a lot more assured than before. All right then. Let's go. Zhong Xian could not bring himself to wait even a moment longer. Leaping onto the back of the blackback tortoise, he quickly sent a telepathic message to Pavilion Master Kue Xiao to inform the latter before quickly heading in the direction of the vacant sea. As a semi-divinity realm beast, the blackback tortoise sped through the water swiftly like a bolt of lightning. Heavenly high immortal realm cultivators would often require at least a day to travel a distance of 2 million li, but with the blackback tortoise traveling at its maximum speed, it only took half a day for him to arrive at his destination. Floating in the air, Zhong Xian gazed down at the vacant sea from above. Just as the blackback tortoise had described, there was not a person or an island to be seen. All that could be seen was the ocean, which seemed to merge together with the sky at the horizon. However, Unlike the deep blue water in the other parts of the Sea of Exiled Stars, the water here had a slight tinge of redness to it, giving it an eerie undertone. It felt like some kind of tragedy had happened there. The water in this region used to be deep blue in color, but ever since that young lady's blood dripped into the water, the area turned into such a state. It hasn't been able to revert back to its original state even after the passing of 2 months, the blackback tortoise said. Nodding slightly, Zhongxian carefully activated his Eye of Insight and entered the water to take a closer look. The slightly red ocean water was surprisingly abundant in spiritual energy, making it feel like a blessed land. It had nourished the beasts and plants living in the area, making them far stronger than those in the other parts of the ocean. Most likely, this had something to do with the blood of the god. Zhongxian swam all the way of the bottom of the ocean, and over there, he found a couple of crimson-colored rocks. They were the godblood rocks he had seen at the Wuhai market previously. There were not too many of such rocks, and most of them did not harness as much power as the one he had seen previously. Zhongxian casually placed his hand on one of the rocks and used the Library of Heaven's Path to analyze it. The compiled book was the same as before, reflecting just the name, Godblood Rock. Zhongxian swam around the area and noticed that the area tinged with redness wasn't too vast. He turned to the blackback tortoise and asked, "Where did that figure appear back then?" "It appeared south of where we currently are. But Master, I recommend you don't head there. The area is currently dominated by the 3 shark brothers. They were the ones who chased me away back then," the blackback tortoise said with a reddened face. 3 shark brothers? Zhongxian frowned. They are the conquerors of the vacant sea. They were already extremely powerful at the heavenly high immortal realm, such that I was never a match for them. Back then, in view of my powerful defense and the fact that I've never provoked them, we never crossed one another. However, after consuming the blood and achieving a breakthrough to the semi-divinity realm, they grew much stronger than before, even more so than me. In order to claim the blood lingering in the region for themselves, they forced me out of the area I previously resided in. As I was no match for them, I had no choice but to leave, the blackback tortoise said. "You are saying that all 3 of them have reached the semi-divinity realm?" Zhongxian's face darkened. Chapter 2041 Conquerors of the Ocean. "Yes, Master," the blackback tortoise said with a nod. It was still able to stand its ground against Pavilion Master Kue Xiao and the others, but it was truly helpless against those sharks. As they were all native to the Ocean of Exiled Stars, they knew the strengths and weaknesses of each other very well. Had it not left the vacant sea, it would have already died. Not only are they at the semi-divinity realm, they are also stronger than me. I specialize in defense whereas they specialize in offense. If that semi-divinity realm cultivator who stalked and fought me earlier was encircled by them, I doubt that he would have even lasted 3 breaths before he breathed his last. The blackback tortoise said. Zhongxian's eyes narrowed into slits upon hearing those words. Bai Xiansheng might not have been the strongest among the heads of the 6 sects, but he was not the weakest either. For someone of his prowess to be unable to survive even 3 breaths before those sharks, it seemed like they were indeed fearsome adversaries. "Master, why don't we just drop the idea? It won't be too late to head there after you achieve a breakthrough to the semi-divinity realm," the blackback tortoise pleaded desperately. Even though its master had many tricks up his sleeves, and the little yellow chick was a formidable beast, it still could not help but feel a little insecure. After all, they were going to face 3 semi-divinity realm beasts at once. Even if the little yellow chick was able to swallow one of them, they would still have to deal with the other 2. Zhongxian paused for a moment before saying, "You should return to the tamed beast sack for a moment. I'll head there discreetly. I'll just take a look and leave without alarming them." He had already gone all the way there, so how could he leave without properly investigating the matter? The blackback tortoise did not specialize in stealth, so it was easy for any other semi-divinity realm beasts to detect its presence. On the other hand, he could conceal his aura just by driving the Heaven's Path divine art. He was confident that he would be able to hide himself even from those 3 sharks that the blackback tortoise spoke of. Seeing that it was impossible to convince its master otherwise, the blackback tortoise returned to the tamed beast sack with a helpless sigh. After that was done, Zhongxian quickly reined in his aura and erased his presence before warily proceeding in the direction that the blackback tortoise had pointed out to him before. He held his breath carefully as he allowed the water currents to carry him across the murky seabed. Fortunately for him, the seabed of the vacant sea was filled with taller seaweed and coral, making it easier to him to hide his silhouette. As he proceeded forward, he wondered if Luo Ruoxin was the one who had entered the azure from here through a breach in the dimension barrier. Who received her? If the young lady whom the blackback tortoise spoke about was referring to Luo Ruoxin, who was the one who had summoned her? So far, the only ones he knew that were capable of conducting rituals to summon deities and gods were the otherworldly demons. But why did this person summon her, and how did she sustain wounds so heavy that she lost so much blood, changing in the ocean? Everything regarding Luo Ruoxin revolved within his mind like an unsolvable memory, leaving him feeling deeply frustrated. He was starting to find it hard to understand the young lady whom he loved. Sighing deeply, he took out the crimson pendant hung in front of his chest. He closed his eyes and focused his consciousness on the spiritual energy within. Slowly, he could feel it becoming warm. It seems like this has something to do with her, Zhongxian thought as he continued speeding ahead. 10 minutes later, he finally came to a halt in a trench at the bottom of the ocean. Based on what the blackback tortoise had said, this trench was where the base of the three sharks was located. Zhongxian peered in and noted that the color of the water was even redder. At the same time, the spiritual energy felt even more abundant. Lush plants intercrossed one another as they crept out from within, creating a dense shroud. This must be where the bulk of the scattered god blood is. The concentration of spiritual energy there was greater than the surroundings, hinting that it was where the spiritual energy was originating from. Furthermore, he could feel the pendant growing hotter. If he wanted to investigate the matter further to see if Luo Ruoxin was tied to it, this would probably be it. Of course, given that it was highly likely that there were 3 semi-divinity realm immortal beasts inside, Zhongxian was in no rush to charge right in. Instead, he hid behind a boulder outside the trench to observe the situation. The dense shroud of greenery blocked much of what he could see, but vaguely, he could still see innumerable life forms swimming about. However, there were no clues that indicated where the base of the sharks was at. He had spoken with the blackback tortoise on the way here, and it seemed like the latter had been attacked by those 3 because it had refused to become their subordinate. If not for its tough shell and swift speed, it might have died to them. Even though they had fought before, the blackback tortoise did not know much about the base of those 3 sharks. As such, it was unable to provide any useful details. There's no helping it. Seeing no merit in biding his time there, Zhongxian stealthily walked alongside the walls of the trench and slipped in. The trench was reminiscent of a mountain valley that extended into unknown depths. The sunlight was unable to reach in there, so it was pitch black. With Zhongxian's current cultivation as a high immortal and his eye of insight, he was able to navigate within such darkness without a problem. Leaning close to the walls of the trench, he gradually proceeded deeper in. The trench was eerily quiet. At some point, all the aquatic creatures that he had seen previously seemed to vanish from sight, as if he had proceeded into some kind of death zone. Zhongxian was confident that he could hide his presence even in the face of semi-divinity realm beasts, so he did not pay it much heed. He continued observing his surroundings closely and advanced deeper in. It might have been due to the effects of the god blood lingering in the area, but the plants in the area were both thick and resilient. Even someone of Zhongxian's fighting prowess was unable to easily pull apart a casual vine lying around. In other words, its resilience was already on par with an average true immortal tier artifact. The effects of the god blood are indeed formidable. Not only does it allow high immortal realm beasts to reach a previously unreachable level, even the plants have also been significantly strengthened. The deeper he proceeded in the trench, the more concentrated the surrounding spiritual energy became. He could feel his cells leaping in excitement, craving to devour the energy lingering around. However, he knew that he would be immediately discovered if he acted as such, so he made sure to hold himself back. After swimming another 2,000 meters deeper, he finally arrived at the seabed. Moving alongside the walls of the trench, he noticed a massive cavern. He activated the Eye of Insight and examined it closely before nodding. This should be the base of the three sharks. There was a particularly oppressive aura coming from within, and this aura somewhat resembled what he felt from the blackback tortoise and pavilion master Kue Xiao. Most likely, the three semi-divinity realm sharks were inside. He touched the crimson pendant hanging in front of his chest once more and realized that it was burning hot. The heat only further intensified as he approached the cavern. Could it be that there is still god blood here that hasn't been devoured by those sharks yet? The rule behind the response of the pendant seemed rather straightforward. The higher the concentration of god blood, the more heat the pendant would emanate. Given how hot the pendant was, it seemed very likely that there was still some god blood that had not been assimilated. If he could find it, he might just be able to find a way to confirm whether it had come from Luo Ruoxin or not. There's no choice, I can only take this risk. Zhong Xian thought with gritted teeth before slowly swimming toward the cavern. The cavern was roughly several hundred meters wide. After proceeding a little further in, he noticed quite a few aquatic creatures lined up in neat formations within the massive cavern. Taking a closer look, he realized that even the weakest of them was at the heavenly true immortal realm. As for high immortals, there must have been at least several hundred of them. Several hundred high immortal realm beasts. Zhong Xian's heart skipped a beat. Was this formation not already stronger than that of any one of the 6 sects? With the strength of our kings, we'll be able to rule over the ocean of exiled stars and ensure that no humans are able to encroach on our territories. That's right. Our kings have already reached the semi-divinity realm, a level comparable to the leaders of the humans' 6 sects. Once they pass down the command, we'll slaughter all humans who dare to invade the ocean to show them who's boss. Several beasts cried out passionately. Zhong Xian looked at the very front of the formation and saw 3 massive thrones erected in the deepest depths of the cavern. 3 sharks were seated on the thrones, each of them emanating tremendous pressure. Semi-divinity realm experts. Each of them possessed strength greater than that of the blackback tortoise. If even each of them was that powerful, it was terrifying to imagine just how powerful their collaboration would be. The reason we have gathered all of you here today is to warn all life forms that the ocean belongs to us. For many years, humans have encroached on our territories and stolen our resources. We shall let those thieving scoundrels know that we shall tolerate their acts of transgression no more, and any trespassers will be massacred without any mercy whatsoever. The shark sitting in the middle spoke with a voice that reverberated loudly throughout the entire cavern. Our king speaks nothing but the utmost truth. The ocean belongs to us. We have to stop the tyranny of the 6 sects, especially that of Starchaser Palace. Those sentiments were echoed by the rest of the aquatic creatures, and they cheered fanatically in support of the movement. Are they planning to formally create their own power? Zhong Xian thought with a frown. There was no doubt that there were many powerful aquatic creatures in the ocean, but none of them had reached the semi-divinity realm before. As such, they did not have the strength to oppose the 6 sects. However, with 3 semi-divinity realm experts suddenly appearing, the ambitions of the high immortal realm aquatic creatures could not be suppressed anymore. Thus, they intended to rally the aquatic beasts together to construct a power that could stand against the 6 sects. That would explain why he had seen so many aquatic creatures earlier, but they simply vanished from sight later on. Most likely, he must have caught them while they were answering the summons and rushing over. Our first target should be Starchaser Palace. Their Starchaser Island is located at the center of the ocean of exiled stars. I have discussed this with the other 2 kings, and we intend to launch a surprise assault to let them know that we, the aquatic creatures, aren't to be trifled with. As long as we can show sufficient might, none of the 6 sects will dare make a move on us. The shark seated on the middle throne said imposingly. The ocean was rich with resources, and the beast cores of many of the aquatic creatures were beneficial to a cultivator's breakthrough. As such, despite the dangers lurking in the area, the 6 sects dispatched their disciples for hunting missions from time to time. This was especially so for Starchaser Palace. Living on a lone island, it was inevitable that they were reliant on the ocean around them for resources. If they wished to rally all the aquatic beasts together and command deference from the 6 sects, there was no better target than Starchaser Palace. A catfish with multiple ears voiced its concerns regarding the issue. My king, it would be most convenient for us to make Starchaser Palace our first target, but I believe that there's a need for us to think things through first. Based on the results of my investigation, the person who summoned that young female god 2 months ago was none other than Palace Chief Du Qingyuan of Starchaser Palace. Chapter 2042 The Unreliable Chick. She's the one behind that matter. The shark seated on the middle throne was somewhat taken aback by that news. Are you certain of it? The reason the three of them had been able to achieve a breakthrough was due to the blood droplets of the young female god falling into the sea. My king, I dispatched my 100,000 subordinates to look into the matter, and I am absolutely sure of it. The catfish replied affirmatively. The shark in the middle took a while to calm itself down before harumphing. Humph. So what if she's able to summon a god? Based on what I saw that day, shortly after entering the Forsaken Continent, the god broke open the surrounding space to head somewhere else, and she hasn't appeared ever since. As long as a god doesn't get involved in the battle, we still stand a good chance in a war against the Sixth Sect. Our big brother is right. Even the gods who have descended to the Forsaken Continent find their strength significantly lowered here, the shark seated on the left remarked smugly. It's for this reason that no gods will descend and interfere in the affairs here other than the Hall of Gods. Even if Starchaser Palace is able to communicate with the gods, it's unlikely that they have the ability to rally the gods to fight on their behalf. Since that's the case, what do we have to fear? No matter how powerful the head of Starchaser Palace is, she's nothing more than an individual. With the combined prowess of us three, killing her will be a walk in the park. The fact that the heavens have allowed us to achieve a breakthrough shows that fate is starting to favor us oceanic creatures. We should seize the day instead of allowing this rare opportunity to slip through our fingers, the shark seated on the right added in agreement. Our era is swiftly arriving. How many of us aquatic creatures have those humans slain in the past? We shall return the favor twofold. We'll let them know that we aren't to be belittled. We aren't to be belittled. Those words immediately sparked the blazing passion among the aquatic creatures. Be it the prawns, octopuses, crabs, oysters. All of them trembled in agitation upon hearing those words. For the past several thousand years, the 6 sects of the humans had held the dominant position on the Forsaken Continent. As a result of that, the aquatic creatures had not dared step on land easily for fear of getting killed. But now that they had the backing of semi-divinity realm experts as well, they had nothing to fear anymore. Hiding at the back, Zhongxian murmured with a frown, the head of Starchaser Palace? Starchaser Palace had been founded by the otherworldly demonic tribe. Considering that Luo Ruoxin was the spirit god, it was only natural for her to answer their summons. If what was said about Luo Ruoxin was right, it was likely that Palace Master Du Qingyuan had summoned her down to the Azure. Right after that, Luo Ruoxin had descended further down to the Master-Teacher continent in order to snatch the Great Codex of Spring and Autumn. From the looks of it, getting in touch with Palace Master Du Qingyuan will be the crux of learning the truth behind everything. He had rushed over there after deducing that the Godblood Rock had something to do with Luo Ruoxin, but it seemed like his focus had been wrong. If Du Qingyuan was the one who had summoned Luo Ruoxin, how could she not know who and where the latter was? I should return for now, Zhongxian thought to himself after learning of this critical piece of information. Putting aside the fact that there were 3 semi-divinity realm beasts there, just the several hundred high immortal realm ones were enough to overwhelm him. The main reason he had sought the true origin of the Godblood was to verify if Luo Ruoxin had really been to the Azure and, from there, determine where she had gone. Since he had been able to acquire the news from Palace Master Du Qingyuan, there was no need for him to remain there anymore. After all, there was no need for him to expose himself to needless danger. So, Zhongxian slowly backed away, and just as he was about to retreat from the cavern, he suddenly felt a pulsation of spiritual energy coming from within. This pulsation of energy caused the pendant around his neck to tighten a little. A frightening amount of heat was being emanated from it. He quickly turned around and saw the shark seated at the centermost throne bringing out a crimson droplet of blood before all the aquatic creatures gathered there. The droplet of blood was roughly the size of a sesame seed, but even so, The amount of energy that it emanated was alarming. It was as if an entire world had been compressed into it. If such an amount of energy was released, the entire ocean would immediately descend into turmoil. "This is the god blood," the centermost shark said as it rose from its throne. "This is the key that allowed us to reach the unattainable semidivinity realm. Pledge your loyalty and serve us with devotion, and you will not be let down by what you receive. My king, we are willing to pledge our lives to you." The appearance of the god blood caused the eyes of the aquatic creatures to light up as they roared in excitement. Even a droplet of blood from a true god was enough for them to push for a breakthrough to semidivinity realm. There was no doubt that it held great allure to all life forms. Seeing that it had managed to rouse the morale of the aquatic creatures, the centermost shark nodded in contentment. Through a mixture of fear tactics and incentives, it was confident that their subordinates would serve them loyally. Those who have reached semidivinity realm really mustn't be underestimated, Zhongxian thought warily. Their strength was one thing, but he had never thought that the sharks would be so skilled in the art of commanding as well. It seemed like human cultivators had really been underestimating the intelligence of other life forms all this while. "I should leave." There was no doubt that Zhongxian was interested in the god blood, but he knew that it was impossible for him to obtain it given his current strength. The risk was too great for him to bear. Besides, there was no need for him to make a move personally. There was no doubt that Starchaser Palace and the rest of the 6 sects would deal with the 3 sharks once they learned of the matter. They could not risk the aquatic creatures forming a power of their own. By then, he could simply lend them a hand in dealing with the sharks. "Who is it?" Boom. A deafening voice reminiscent of rumbling thunder tremored through the entire cavern, causing rock fragments and dust to fall to the ground. Following that, 3 boundless auras burst forth. "What's going on?" Zhongxian thought with a frown. He had been suppressing his aura the whole time, such that it should not have been possible for the other party to notice him easily. Besides, even if the other party did notice him, it should have happened as soon as he entered the cavern. Why would such a thing happen just as he was about to leave? Perplexed, Zhongxian turned his head around, only to nearly faint in horror. At some point in time, the god blood that was floating right before the eyes of the aquatic creatures had vanished without a trace, causing a huge panic within the cavern. The 3 semidivinity realm sharks flew into a fit of rage. They released their powerful auras, displaying their determination to rip the culprit into shreds. "There!" A voice echoed in the air all of a sudden. In response to that, a shot of water current burst forth and struck the ceiling of the cavern, causing rock fragments to fall to the ground. Tracing the shot of water current, Zhongxian lifted his head to take a look. What he saw nearly caused his to keel over. In the corner of the cavern, a little yellow chick was frantically flapping its wings to maneuver through the water. At the same time, loud burps were escaping from its mouth. The energy of the god blood could be felt pulsating within its body. It was obvious who the culprit who stole the god blood was. "I'm not going to accompany your suicidal tendencies." What else could Zhongxian do in a situation like this other than turn tail and flee? This fellow was really an idiot. There were 3 semidivinity realm beasts and several hundred high immortal realm aquatic creatures there, and that dumb chick had still gone forward to devour their god blood. Was that any different from committing suicide? "Master, wait for me." Before Zhongxian could get far, the little yellow chick cried out loudly, and the next moment, it had already caught up with him. "The might of the god blood is greater than I thought. I am at my limit and can't really move anymore. I'll need to rest for a while." "Who?" Right after saying those words, the little yellow chick dived right into his tamed beast sack. Looking around him, Zhongxian saw a whole army of aquatic creatures staring at his revealed profile with stunned looks on their faces, and he nearly burst into tears. "My heavens, just what did I do so wrong to deserve such a punishment? You sure have it easy, going to sleep and dumping all the responsibility to me. What am I supposed to do now?" Zhongxian cursed beneath his breath. He really wanted to roast that damned chick alive. But he knew that it was only possible if he got out there alive. Without any hesitation, he immediately executed his Heaven's Path movement art and fled. If he waited any longer, he would lose his life. "Capture him." How dare a human come here and steal our god blood? Kill him. Let's make meat paste out of him to feed the dogs. You buffoon, we don't have dogs underwater. You can feed him to me instead. The aquatic creatures bellowed in frenzy. It was not too long ago that they had declared confidently that they would expel the humans from the ocean, yet a moment later, one of them infiltrated their nest and stole their god blood. It was inevitable that they were infuriated. Boom boom boom. As Zhongxian fled, innumerable surges of energy kept exploding around him, leaving goosebumps rising all over his arms. He really wanted to burst into tears. I am just an innocent bystander. I swear that I'm not the culprit behind this. Why won't any of you believe me? The grey shark seated on the lift throne rose up and scoffed in fury. Did you think that this is a place where you can come and go as you please? With a whip of its tail, it appeared right before Zhongxian to block his escape. There was no doubt that Zhongxian's Heaven's Path movement art was formidable, but his movement speed was severely impeded due to the viscosity of the water. On the other hand, the opponents that he was facing had spent their lives in the water, and their physiques were adapted for gliding through the water. As such, he had no speed advantage whatsoever before the other party. You thieving human, you shall pay for your foolishness. The grey shark whipped its powerful tail toward Zhongxian with crushing might that caused even the surrounding space to collapse. There was no doubt that even the current Zhongxian did not have the ability to withstand such a powerful strike. The threat of a semi-divinity realm beast that specialized in offense was indeed far greater than that of the blackback tortoise. In this moment, Zhongxian panicked a little. He had always been proud of his speed, but in the water, it was as if he was a crawling snail competing against a sprinting hare. Turning to take a look, Zhongxian saw that the huge army of high immortal realm aquatic creatures was glaring at him ferociously. The other two semi-divinity realm sharks had also darted over to him with killing intent flaring from them. Zhongxian's reaction was quick, but it was inevitable that he was handicapped against the aquatic creatures in a race underwater. Before he knew it, he was already tightly encircled. Go. Knowing the urgency of the situation, Zhongxian flicked his wrist. Hoo. 5 heavenly high immortal tier swords appeared before him. With an upward flick of his finger, these 5 swords, imbued with the god's sword intent, pierced toward the tip of the cavern. The semi-divinity realm shark before him was simply too powerful, so there was no way he could afford to face it directly. At the same time, he would be pushed back into the cavern, thus losing all chances of fleeing. Thus, he could not afford to be bogged down here. Since he was surrounded from all 4 directions, the only way he could escape was through the ceiling of the cavern. If he could knock a way out for himself, he would be able to get to the trench, and utilizing the cover of the plants, he might just be able to get away safely. It would be hard to find his tiny figure amid the massive ocean filled with all kinds of huge creatures. As long as he could get out of this cavern, with his disguising ability, there was a good chance that he would be able to make a successful escape. Chapter 2043 Encirclement of the Sharks. Boom. The 5 heavenly high immortal tier swords released their god's sword intent simultaneously, their combined might surpassing even that of his sea-severing sword. In an instant, a passageway that he could escape through was drilled in the ceiling. Zhongxian immediately made his way in. As soon as he dived into the passageway, a loud explosion echoed beneath him. The space where he was standing at previously had been utterly decimated. I need to hurry up. Zhongxian knew that his time was limited before those aquatic creatures beneath caught up with him. Thus, he infused his energy furiously into the 5 swords, turning them into drills that reduced the ceiling to dust upon contact. It did not take long for the water to turn murky. Where do you think you're going? Boom. A furious howl echoed through the passageway, and Zhongxian could feel the entire cavern tremoring. The sharks clearly did not expect Zhongxian to dive right into the ceiling. Nevertheless, they quickly pursued him. Due to Zhongxian's small stature, the passageway that he had dug out was not big enough for the sharks to pass through. As such, they had no choice but to use their own strength to ram their own way out. It took 3 breaths and a continuous infusion of zhenqi for Zhongxian to escape from the other end. As soon as he broke out, he swiftly stowed his swords away before charging right into the coral and vines in the trench. Before he could get too far, a resounding explosion echoed from the cavern beneath. Amid the murky waters mixed with sediment, a shark charged out furiously. It opened its mouth and spat out a jet of water. Boom! The jet of water dashed upward with astounding momentum, tearing apart even the plants that Zhongxian thought were incredibly resilient with ease. Parry. Seeing that it was impossible for him to evade the jet of water in time, Zhongxian took out the Tongzhang sword and slashed his blade down furiously with a livid look on his face. The sword qi collided with the jet of water current, causing Zhongxian to feel a tearing pain between the webbing of his finger. While he did manage to deflect the enemy's attack, it had also left him with a stifling ache in his chest, causing him to tumble backward uncontrollably. Powerful. Zhongxian's body stiffened a little. This was the first time that he had faced off with a semi-divinity realm expert in the truest sense. Even when he tamed the blackback tortoise previously, he had tapped into the strength of the little yellow chick in order to subdue it. It was one thing to see a semi-divinity realm cultivator in action, but it was another matter to experience it firsthand. Even though he had managed to achieve a breakthrough to the lesser high immortal realm, and his physical body had managed to reach the heavenly high immortal realm, he felt like he still could not withstand a single attack from the enemy. Zhongxian quickly regained control of his tumbling body before dashing outward once more. If even facing a single semi-divinity realm expert was so fearsome, he could not imagine having to deal with 3 of them at once. Furthermore, there were still several hundred high immortal realm aquatic creatures lying in wait for him. His only option was to run. From the moment you dared steal our possession, your fate was sealed. A thunderous roar echoed from above. Alarmed, Zhongxian raised his head, only to see another shark charging at him with its mouth wide open, revealing innumerable sharp teeth that emanated cold glints. While one of the sharks was pursuing him, the other 2 had dashed out from the cavern with even greater speed to block his way from the front. At the same time, an even more powerful jet of water shot toward him from above. Knowing that he was in a terrible position, Zhongxian did not dare hold back. With a flick of his wrist, he took out the semi-divinity artifact that he had tamed previously and compressed it together to form a massive barrier. A deafening explosion happened right after. The shockwave blasted all the surrounding plants and rocks into dust. Under the recoil, Zhongxian felt both of his arms going numb, as if he could not raise them anymore. While the semi-divinity artifact did allow him to withstand their offense, the attack had still jolted his innards, causing him to sustain severe internal injuries. What the hell was that? Zhongxian felt like he was on the verge of a mental breakdown. He had only gone there to scout out the area, not to alarm the enemy, and he had indeed managed to achieve what he had set out to do. The saying was really true: all it takes is a lousy teammate to bring down an entire team. A semi-divinity artifact. Seeing the shield that Zhongxian had brought out, the eyes of the sharks shone in excitement. A droplet of god blood in exchange for a weapon. I guess that's not too bad a deal. As powerful as the god blood was, all they needed was a single droplet of it in order to reach the semi-divinity realm. Beyond that, it was not of much use. However, if they could tame a semi-divinity artifact as well, there was no doubt that their fighting prowess would rise by leaps and bounds. Boom boom boom. The 3 sharks continued bombarding the shield from all 3 directions, determined to break it down. Even though Zhongxian was still holding on for the time being, he felt as though he was going to be paralyzed under the series of impacts. He immediately bellowed, "Blackback tortoise, hurry up and get me out of here." Who? The blackback tortoise of roughly 100 meters in length abruptly materialized, and as soon as it appeared, it dashed directly upward with Zhongxian on its back. Its speed was much faster than that of Zhongxian's, but it was still unable to outrun the 3 sharks. The 3 sharks continued pouring attacks down upon them, and it felt like the entire ocean would be destroyed at this old tortoise. "I never thought that you would choose to submit to a human instead of us. You are truly the black sheep of all aquatic creatures. I would have understood it if you submitted to an expert, but he's only a lesser high immortal. It's as if you are regressing with time. What a fool. We let you off, but you chose to come back. Since that's the case, don't expect us to show any mercy. You can be buried here together with that new master of yours." Cold sneers echoed all around them. Seeing how their old foe, the blackback tortoise, had submitted to the young man before them, the three sharks could not help but mock it. As the blackback tortoise sustained more and more damage, its speed reduced visibly. Before they could even get out of the trench, it had already sent a telepathic message over. "Master, I fear that we won't be able to get out of here at this rate." The reason it had been able to escape previously was because it had escaped as soon as the confrontation started, and the three sharks had no intention of going that far against it. But this time, its master had stolen the sharks' god blood and reduced their base to a pile of rubble. There was no way that the sharks would let them off. "You're right. It doesn't seem like we'll be able to get away at this rate," Zhongxian murmured in agreement as he quickly assessed the situation around him. While they were clashing with the three semi-divinity realm sharks, the high immortal realm aquatic creatures that he had seen in the cavern earlier had already moved to seal all possible escape routes. In other words, they would be tied down no matter where they headed to, and eventually, they would come under the tight encirclement of the three sharks. "What should we do?" the blackback tortoise asked worriedly. It had warned its master time and time again not to go there, but he just would not listen. In the end, disaster really did strike. Was it really going to die at the hands of the three sharks that it had gone through so much in order to escape from previously? "Since it's impossible for us to get away, we'll just have to make a stand," Zhongxian said as he stood up on the back of the blackback tortoise. The opponents might be three semi-divinity realm experts, but he had a semi-divinity realm artifact, a semi-divinity realm tamed beast, a clone, and many soulless metal humanoids. They would not be able to bring him down easily. "You wish to fight against them?" The blackback tortoise shuddered in fear. "How? I can only hold back one of them for a short while." "It's fine. Just hold back one of them while I try to kill the other. As long as we can kill one of them swiftly, we should be able to make them hesitate." Zhongxian bit his lips. The three sharks had allied themselves with one another and proclaimed themselves as brothers, but he was betting that their relationship was one of convenience rather than true kinship. If that was really the case, as long as he could slay one of the sharks, the other two, as well as the several hundred high immortal realm aquatic beasts around, would have to think twice before making a move. That would provide him an ideal opportunity to make his escape. In any case, his goal was to get out of there safely rather than to get rid of all his opponents. "Very well then." Gritting its teeth, the blackback tortoise retracted its neck and limbs into his tortoiseshell before charging right toward one of the sharks. At the same time, Zhongxian morphed his shield into a massive web of metal chains as he charged forth along with it as well. "Your opponent is me." But before he could get far, a shark charged right in his direction and swept its tail toward him. Zhongxian immediately converged the web of chains together to deflect the attack, but the powerful impact still slammed him into the wall, creating another huge depression in the trench. Humph! Wiping the fresh blood from the corner of his lips, Zhongxian brought out a soulless metal humanoid and commanded it to charge toward the shark. "You have a helper." "Huh." Without any hesitation, the shark opened its mouth wide and crunched down on the soulless metal humanoid. "What you have here isn't a helper but food. That depends on whether you are able to digest it or not." Zhongxian smirked. Boom. The soulless metal humanoid exploded on the spot. Pu. Due to the massive explosion, the shark spurted a mouthful of blood and threw out one of its sharp teeth, leaving it in an unkempt state. "How dare you hurt me? I'll tear you apart." Feeling a stinging pain within its body, the shark was infuriated. It had not sustained such injuries since reaching the semi-divinity realm. Su. It charged right toward Zhongxian with its mouth wide open, seemingly intent on devouring him. On the other hand, Zhongxian's eyelids were twitching in disbelief. That darned shark's still fine after suffering an explosion within its body? That was a heavenly high immortal realm soulless metal humanoid, and its explosion should have destroyed everything within a radius of 100 meters. The explosion had occurred within the body of the shark, but all it had done was to spurt a mouthful of blood and shed a single tooth. Were semi-divinity realm beasts really that resilient? Zhongxian immediately morphed the metal chains into a massive shield in order to block the shark's bite. He was just about to toss yet another soulless metal humanoid into the other party's mouth when he saw the final shark circling behind him. "Damn it, I guess I can only use my clone." Zhong Xian knew that it was impossible for him to face two semi-divinity realm experts simultaneously in his state. He could very well die at this rate. Desperate, he was thinking of bringing out his clone and Vicious as well to support him when the shark behind suddenly came to a halt. Following that, a resounding voice echoed across the entire trench. Halt! Boom! The one who had made the command was the shark that had sat on the centermost throne back in the cavern, the strongest among the three. The shout made the shark, which was intent on swallowing Zhong Xian whole, retreat slightly, and the other one that was battling with the blackback tortoise also paused its offense. Big brother, this human dared barge into our territory and steal our god blood. This is an unforgivable crime. We have to teach him a lesson, the shark that had lost a tooth cried indignantly. Big brother, I agree with our second brother. Why should we show these B***stards any mercy? They might have many means up their sleeves, but with our combined might, we should be able to destroy them easily, the other shark facing the blackback tortoise exclaimed in agreement. Shut your mouths, the shark that the other two addressed as Big Brother bellowed. After silencing the other two, it turned to Zhong Xian and assessed him carefully with its massive eyes. Perplexed by the current situation, Zhong Xian narrowed his eyes and warily drove his zhenqi, fearful that the other party was just buying time to assault him. But the next moment, the massive shark before him suddenly kneeled down and exclaimed, "Your humble subordinate pays its respect, master." Chapter 2044 Taming the Sharks Master? Humble subordinate. The blackback tortoise and Zhong Xian glanced at one another, completely taken aback by the abrupt twist. The sharks had been dying to tear them apart a moment ago, so why would one suddenly turn into his subordinate? The ones who were shocked by the situation were not just limited to those two. The other aquatic creatures swarming the area were stunned as well. Their kings had always hated humans with a passion, such that there was no doubt that they would have incited a genocide if they could. Just a moment ago, they had even been discussing a scheme to teach the six sects a lesson. Why would one of the kings suddenly change its mind? Not to mention, its body was bent perpendicular as if it was a set square, and it even called the human that stole their godblood its master. Big brother, why are you acknowledging this measly being as your master? The other two sharks could hardly believe what they were hearing. Shut your mouth. The big brother shark roared angrily. Get over here right now and pay your respects to master. Those two sharks had no idea what their big brother was up to, but they dared not disobey its command. With a shake of their tails, they swam all the way up to Zhong Xian. They shot a hesitant glance at their big brother once more, and after seeing the look on the latter's face, they trembled fearfully and hurriedly bowed down. Your humble subordinates pay its respects, master. This. Zhong Xian had no idea what to make of the current situation. After a moment of hesitation, he said, "Acknowledge me as your master." Regardless of whether they were putting on an act or not, they would no longer be able to do anything once they were bound by soul contracts. Yes. To Zhong Xian's surprise, the big brother shark offered its blood essence without any hesitation. As for the other two, they were indecisive for a moment, but after a piercing glare from the big brother shark, they quickly offered their blood essence. Zhong Xian accepted their blood essences and completed the soul contract. As telepathic connections were formed among them, he realized that the sharks really were not plotting anything at all. They were earnestly acknowledging him as their master. It was just a moment ago that they had been trying to tear one another apart when all of a sudden, they had become his tamed beasts. This peculiar situation left Zhong Xian feeling deeply confused. Could it be that he was actually very charismatic, such that they could not help but submit to him after witnessing his splendor? But he had not intentionally released any imposing aura or the like. The big brother shark noticed Zhong Xian's bewilderment and explained, "It's all due to the bestowment of the god blood that we were able to achieve a breakthrough to the semi-divinity realm. Master, you carry a token of the god with you, so it's our duty to serve you." A token of the god? Zhong Xian subconsciously lowered his gaze to look at the crimson pendant hung around his neck. He would usually place it within his clothes, but due to the intense heat from reacting to the god blood, he had hung it outside his clothes instead. "That's right," the shark replied respectfully. Zhong Xian widened his eyes in realization. He had guessed previously that the god blood was related to Luo Ruoxin, and this verified his guesses. It was through consuming the fresh blood that Luo Ruoxin had spilled into the ocean that these tortoises had managed to achieve a breakthrough to the semidivinity realm. As such, they held natural deference toward anything related to her. Regardless of how that happened, it was a huge relief that he was finally out of danger. He quickly drank a bottle of chicken soup to heal his injuries before turning to the big brother shark. Dismiss the others. There are a few questions that I would like to ask you. The sharks quickly passed down the orders. The high immortal realm aquatic creatures could sense that their previously agreed upon plans would go awry if they scattered right now, and they felt incredibly indignant about it. However, they did not dare go against the semi-divinity realm sharks, so they could only leave the area with reddened eyes. After all the aquatic creatures evacuated the area, Zhongxian turned to the three of them and nodded wisely. Since you have submitted to me, I should bestow names upon you so that I can better address each of you. You will be Shark 1, you will be Shark 2, and you will be Shark 3. The three shark brothers were befuddled. Paying no heed to the constipated looks on the trio's faces, Zhongxian continued grimly. I want you to recount to me in detail how the head of Starchaser Palace conducted a ritual to the heavens to summon a god, how the god descended to the world, and where the god eventually went. It all happened 2 months ago. Shark 1 began to recount what happened that day. The head of Starchaser Palace suddenly appeared in the vacant sea. Back then, we didn't know it was her. We were only furious to see a human trespassing into our territory, so we assaulted her. Due to the disparity in strength, we were all defeated. Considering how they were all only at the heavenly high immortal realm back then, it was inevitable that they were not a match for Palace Master Du Qingyuan. Following which, she used our fresh blood as a tribute for her ritual to tear apart the heavens and summon a god. Her first attempt failed, so she pushed herself to her limits and tried a second time. She probably expended all her energy in the midst of doing so as her appearance swiftly withered to that of an old granny, and it looked as if she would pass away from her frailty. All of us thought that it would be the end like that, but who could have known that a god would really appear at that moment? As Shark 1 spoke about the god, its body trembled uncontrollably. It was hard to tell whether its reaction was out of fear or agitation. I can't really say for sure, but it seems like even the second ritual was only a partial success. Perhaps it was due to the lacking strength of the head of Starchaser Palace, or the dimension barrier was simply too resilient, but the god was still unable to pass through it and descend upon our world. So, the god forced her way through the dimension barrier, and she succeeded in the end. However, she ended up paying a heavy price for it. Her forceful actions resulted in a severe backlash from the heavens of the Forsaken Continent, causing her to lose a fair bit of blood. As tributes for the ritual, the three of us were in the vicinity when the god breached the dimension barrier and came over. When we saw the blood from the god dripping in the ocean, we thought that this might be a golden opportunity for us. Thus, we drank a droplet of blood each, and before we knew it, we fell into a deep sleep. So, we don't really know what happened after that. You don't know what happened afterward? Earlier, didn't you say that the god left afterward? Zhongxian frowned. I was the one who saw that. Shark 3 spoke up. I was more timid than the other two, so I hesitated quite a bit before swallowing the god blood. I vaguely saw the god placing her hand on the body of the head of Starchaser Palace, and the latter slowly reverted to her youthful form. They exchanged a few words, and shortly after, there seemed to be another ritual elsewhere summoning the god. Another dimension rift appeared, and the god left the Forsaken Continent through it. There was another ritual elsewhere. Zhongxian fell into deep thought. If that was the case, it was very like that other ritual was conducted by Sovereign Chen Yong to summon Luo Ruoxin to the Master Teacher Continent. Thinking back, it could be due to the backlash from consecutively breaching two-dimension barriers that Luo Ruoxin's strength had been severely limited when she first descended to the Master Teacher Continent. As a result, she had been forced to impersonate a 6-star Master Teacher until she finally regained her strength. Of course, this was just speculation. As for the exact circumstances, he could only verify it with the head of Starchaser Palace in person. Zhongxian took out Luo Ruoxin's portrait in order to verify with the three sharks if they were the same person, But just as had happened with the blackback tortoise, even though the three sharks could vaguely remember what had happened, they were unable to recall the physical characteristics of the god other than her gender. Then, how did you know that this is a token of the god from back then? Zhongxian asked with a frown. The god used that pendant to force her way through the dimension barrier back then. It was as bright as the sun, all of us witnessed it clearly, so there's no way we wouldn't recognize it, Shark One replied. They might have forgotten the physical characteristics of the god, but they could never forget the splendor of her might. Given that the ritual was incomplete, it should have been impossible for the god to descend upon the Forsaken Continent. It was by using the might of the pendant to rip open the dimension barrier that she managed to pass through eventually. It was for this reason that they felt deep fear toward the prowess of the pendant and dared not make a move. Even a droplet of blood from the god was enough for them to make a breakthrough. Considering how this young man had a token of the god in his possession, it was likely that he had deep ties with the god. If they wished to reach anywhere higher than semi-divinity realm in the future, this young man would be their greatest bet. Pride and backbone? All of that meant nothing in the face of the superior might commanded by the gods. Does this pendant have the ability to tear open the dimension barrier? Zhongxian wondered as he held the crimson pendant tightly in his grasp. It still felt warm. He tried infusing his zhenqi into it, but nothing happened. He tried using the Godblood Rock, Eye of Insight, and his own zhenqi on the crimson pendant, but there was simply no response. If not for the wonders it had displayed from time to time, he would have really wondered if it was just an ordinary pendant. It might be because my cultivation is still lacking. Zhongxian shook his head as he thought about the time his cultivation went berserk. Given that Luo Ruoxin had entrusted this artifact to him, there was bound to be something extremely important about it. The fact that it was able to suppress the inner demons that threatened to collapse even the Library of Heaven's Path spoke a lot about it. Since the three of you have submitted to me, you will be following me from this day onward. There are many things that I'll require your help with, and you can rest assured that you'll be handsomely rewarded for your service, Zhongxian said as he tucked the crimson pendant safely back inside his clothes. With the loyalty of these three sharks, he would be under the protection of 4 semi-divinity realm beasts. Adding in the semi-divinity artifact in his possession as well, even the Hall of Gods would have to think twice before making a move on here. Zhongxian took out a bottle of chicken soup and passed it over to the injured shark for it to recuperate from its injuries. After that was done, he continued asking them a few questions regarding the god blood. He learned that of the entire vacant sea, the only ones who had successfully made a breakthrough were the 3 sharks and the blackback tortoise because they had been the closest when that incident occurred. Shark One had acted quickly back then to store an additional droplet of god blood, but that had eventually ended up as chick fodder. As for the rest, they had diffused all over the vacant sea. While the diffused god blood did strengthen the aquatic creatures and plants living in the region, it was not sufficient for them to make a breakthrough to the semi-divinity realm. Zhongxian had intended to study the remaining god blood to double confirm the issue, but since there was none left, he could only drop the idea. Another option was for him to force Little Chick to spit it out, but that did not seem viable. Following that, Zhongxian procured quite a bit of blood from the 3 sharks and fed them to the serpentine dragon, 9-headed fiery phoenix, and the rest, but they were still unable to make a breakthrough. It seemed like it was not that easy to achieve a breakthrough to the semi-divinity realm. It would take a lot more than the blood essences of other semi-divinity realm experts in order to take that final step forward. After that was done, Zhongxian moved Shark 2, Shark 3, and Blackback Tortoise into the tamed beast sack before riding Shark 1 back to Starchaser Island. While Zhongxian was exploring the vacant sea, the group from the Myriad Beasts Hall, which was still on the way to Starchaser Island, received a message from the 7-star pavilion. Elder Qin Yuan, what's wrong? Elder Liao asked. With his eyes still fixated on the communication jade token in his hand, Elder Qin Yuan replied, I received a message saying that the 7-star pavilion has just chosen a new pavilion master. Elder Liao was surprised by the abrupt news, and he asked, who is it? It's a young man named Liu Yang. His cultivation is at the lesser high immortal realm, but he managed to master all the battle techniques of the 7-star pavilion within a very short period of time. His talent in the field of martial arts is said to be unrivaled, and his cultivation is exceptional. Elder Qin Yuan said. Who would have thought that shortly after they found a highly talented hall master, the 7-star pavilion would find a worthy successor as well. As the saying went, heroes rise in times of trouble. Perhaps this was a premonition that a huge crisis was awaiting them in the near future. Liu Yang. I don't think I have heard of that name before, Elder Liao muttered contemplatively. The same news had reached the ears of the group from the Ascendant Cloud Sword Pavilion rushing toward Starchaser Island as well. The group consisted of only Han Jianqiu, First Elder He Tian, and a few others. One thing of note was that the adolescent youth, Wu Chen, who had traveled all the way to Ascendant Cloud Sword Pavilion in search of Zhongxian, was part of the group as well. Not too long after we established Zhongxian as our new sect leader, the Myriad Beasts Hall and the 7-star pavilion rushed to do the same as well. Han Jianqiu shook his head after receiving the news. Rushed to do the same as well? What do you mean by that? First Elder He Tian asked doubtfully. A few days ago, the Myriad Beasts Hall nominated a middle-aged man named Zheng Yang as their new hall master. Just a moment ago, I received a message from the 7-star pavilion saying that Kue Xiao has stepped down, and he has passed his position on to a young man named Liu Yang, Han Jianqiu said. Zhongxian, Zheng Yang, Liu Yang. Hearing those three familiar names, a bad premonition gripped Wu Chen as his lips began twitching uncontrollably. With a look of disbelief on his face, he murmured, "It can't be that they are all the same person?" Chapter 2045 Paying respects to the Palace Master. There must be at least billions of people on the Forsaken Continent, so it was inevitable that some of them would share the same names. But for the other two rising stars of the other sects to have the same names as Zhongxian's direct disciples? There was no way such a coincidence could possibly happen. While others on the Forsaken Continent might not know of Zhongxian's direct disciples, Wu Chen was familiar with them. It was no easy feat to ascend to the Forsaken Continent. It was already incredible that Zhongxian had been able to make his way up there with his own strength, so how could he possibly be able to bring his direct disciples along with him? Not to mention, it was hard to believe that even his direct disciples would grow as monstrously fast as him. In other words, he suspected that Zheng Yang and Liu Yang were Zhongxian's aliases. Thinking back to the days on the Master-Teacher Continent, Zhongxian had always liked to take on new personas, such as Yang Xian, Luo Tianya, and Sun Qiong. What better way was there for a humble bragger to humble brag than this? Sharply catching Wu Chen's murmurings, Han Jianqiu turned his gaze over and asked, "They are the same person? What do you mean by that?" "No, it's nothing much." Wu Chen shook his head. "It was just a casual remark." "I see." Han Jianqiu nodded a little before remarking, "It seems like there will be a commotion at the Azure Bridge this time. I wonder how Zhongxian will fare against Zheng Yang and Liu Yang. To be honest, I'm looking forward to seeing those three geniuses going against one another in the dueling ring. It will indeed be an interesting match." Elder Liao nodded in agreement. Wu Chen's eyes darted downward, and he murmured with an even softer voice that only he could hear, "It's indeed something worth anticipating. It's just that I wonder if the person in question feels the same way." Half a day later, Zhongxian arrived back at Starchaser Island. Paying respects to Pavilion Master Liu, Kue Xiao clasped his fist. He had thought that the young man had just gone around touring the area, oblivious to the fact that he had just made a round trip to the highly dangerous vacant sea. Pavilion Master? Zhongxian frowned at that title. "I have just instructed the elders to officially relay the message to the other 5 sects. From this day onward, you will officially be the incumbent head of our 7-star pavilion," Kue Xiao said with a cheery smile. "There's no need to worry though. I'll be supporting you as an elder." Zhongxian did not expect everything to proceed so swiftly, and he could not help but shake his head. However, since he had already given his word to Kue Xiao, he would not back out anymore. Besides, his influence as the head of the 7-star pavilion would make it much easier for him to move around the Forsaken Continent. He would just have to leave the blackback tortoise with them before leaving the Forsaken Continent in order to repay them for this favor. How is the relationship between the 7-star pavilion and Starchaser Palace? Zhongxian asked. On the whole, Starchaser Palace doesn't really have friendly relations with any of the other 5 sects. The 7-star Pavilion liaises with Starchaser Palace regarding business matters, but other than that, I'm afraid that we don't have any informal connections with them, Elder Kue Xiao replied. In other words, we aren't close to them at all? Zhong Xian asked with a deep frown. It wouldn't be wrong to say that. Elder Kue Xiao nodded. However, it doesn't mean that it's impossible to bargain with them. As the head of the 7-star Pavilion, as long as what you request isn't overboard, they will still try to accommodate your request to uphold some basic formalities. Even if the 2 sects were not close with one another, as fellow heads of the 6 sects, they still had to give each other some leeway. After all, there was no saying when they would require each other's help, especially since there was a greater threat looming above them. It would be unwise to cause a fallout over minor issues. I wish to pay a visit to the head of Starchaser Palace to ask about some matters, Zhong Xian said. If you are just asking some questions, it shouldn't be too much of a problem. Elder Kue Xiao nodded. As long as it doesn't involve their rituals and the gods, I don't see any issues in that. As you know, Starchaser Palace's greatest strength is its ability to reach out to the gods. Naturally, that's a confidential matter to them, and it would be unwise to ask them to share such sensitive matters. Back then, when the heads of the 6 sects were gathered together to discuss their plans for the Azure Bridge, Hall Master Qin Yuan had just broached the subject a little, and that had nearly landed them in a fight. As long as the young man did not touch this sensitive topic, everything should be fine. Those words left Zhong Xian completely wide-eyed. Those 2 were the exact things that he wanted to ask the head of Starchaser Palace about. Taking the young man's response into sight, Elder Kue Xiao's eyes widened as well as he carefully asked, Pavilion Master Liu, do you intend to ask them about that? Well, there is something extremely important to me that I really need to verify with Palace Master Du, Zhong Xian replied hesitantly. Do you know how I can get into contact with her? Even though Elder Kue Xiao had already discouraged him, he still wanted to give it a try. If he visited her and asked her in his capacity as the head of the 7-star Pavilion, it was more likely that he would receive a favorable response compared to him probing around as a disciple. Seeing that the young man's mind was made up, Elder Kue Xiao rubbed his temples in exasperation. It was just a moment ago that he had officially announced that he was passing down his position to this young fellow, and this young fellow was already starting to stir trouble. Eventually, though, out of consideration that the young man was already the pavilion master, he still spoke up. It's not too difficult to get in contact with her. I should be able to help you arrange a meeting. However, Pavilion Master Liu, you must exercise the utmost prudence. Palace Master Du is a very hot-tempered person. If you get into a verbal disagreement with her, I will have to ask you to calm down and consider the interests of our sect. To be honest, he was not too worried about the young man's safety. Du Qingyuan was a formidable cultivator, but their new pavilion master had a semi-divinity artifact and the blackback tortoise with him. If a battle really broke out, the one who would be in a disadvantageous position might not necessarily be him. That being said, it was still best to avoid a conflict altogether. As heads of their respective powers, their relationship with one another would dictate the future relationship between their respective powers. Rest assured, I would just like to ask some basic questions. I have no intention of burning bridges, Zhong Xian said with a smile. He had always gone with the mentality of an eye for an eye. He would not cause trouble if the other party did not provoke him, not to mention that the relationship between the 2 sects was at stake. That's a huge relief. Elder Kue Xiao patted his chest in relief upon receiving that promise. All right then, I'll help you contact her right now. After that, he took out a communication jade token and tapped it lightly. A few moments later, he raised his head and said, Pavilion Master Liu, she has agreed to a meeting with you. However, she requests for the meeting to be in Starchaser Palace. Zhong Xian nodded in response. The location did not matter to him. Under Elder Kue Xiao's lead, the 2 of them quickly made their way through the island, and soon enough, they were already standing right before the massive gates of Starchaser Palace. Unlike other sects, Starchaser Palace appeared to be nothing more than an ordinary palace. It was located at the center of the massive city, just like the 7-star Pavilion, but its form was nowhere near as imposing as the latter's 7 towers. However, if one took a closer look, one would realize that the spiritual energy within millions of li was surging endlessly toward this very palace, forming an enormous formation. It was probably due to such a firm foundation that the Starchaser Pavilion had been able to thrive despite being surrounded by powerful aquatic creatures. Elder Kue Xiao handed the greeting scroll over, and the two of them were immediately granted entry to the palace. Led by a female attendant, they were taken from corridor to corridor before eventually being settled within a spacious guest hall. They waited for a short while before another female attendant entered the guest hall and said, "Pavilion Master Liu, our palace master wishes to have a private meeting with you. I'll have to ask Elder Kue Xiao to rest here for the time being." "I understand." Elder Kue Xiao nodded. He knew that the young man had something confidential that he had to discuss with Du Qingyuan, so it was not convenient for him to be listening in as well. Thus, Elder Kue Xiao told the young man to take care of himself before settling back down in the chair. Zhong Xian followed the female attendant out of the guest hall, and passing through the corridor, he soon arrived before a private chamber. The interior of the chamber was deathly silent, and there was a massive veil at the center of the room that hindered one's sight. A calm voice sounded from beyond the veil. "To what do I owe this visit, Pavilion Master Liu? I just received news regarding your inauguration, and I didn't think that you would come knocking shortly after. The 7-star Pavilion has always been a trading partner of Starchaser Palace. I reckon that a matter that requires Pavilion Master Liu to request a meeting with me so urgently is something of vital importance. I'll try my best to fulfill your request as long as it's something within my means." Zhong Xian was slightly displeased to see that the head of Starchaser Palace was putting on airs with him by facing him through a veil. He had never heard that Du Qingyuan had such a habit, so he could not help but think that the latter was trying to test or mock him. Nevertheless, he clasped his fist and said, "I do have an urgent request that requires your assistance." Palace Master Du. The person beyond the veil nodded. "Feel free to speak your mind." "Palace Master Du, I heard that you have conducted a ritual 2 months ago for a god to descend upon the Forsaken Continent. I would like to ask some matters regarding the god," Zhong Xian said. Since he was already there, he was determined to clarify the doubts in his mind. "I have no idea where you received the news from, Pavilion Master Liu, but I am unaware of what you are speaking of. Given so, I fear that there's nothing I can tell you," the person beyond the veil replied coldly. A frown appeared on Zhong Xian's forehead, and he said, "I have visited the vacant sea personally to investigate the matter, and there are witnesses stating that you visited the area 2 months ago. You conducted a ritual in order to summon a god, and the ritual failed, resulting in the god incurring some severe injuries while trying to barge her way through. Pavilion Master Liu must have heard wrongly. I have been cooped myself in Starchaser Palace for years, and there's no way I could have been at the vacant sea. I'm afraid that I know nothing of what you are saying at all," the person beyond the veil replied. "If you are here to grasp at straws, I'm afraid that I don't have time to accompany you, Pavilion Master Liu. Xiao Qing, send off our guest." The female attendant from before immediately walked over and gestured outward. "Pavilion Master Liu, this way please. Since you are reluctant to share about that matter, Palace Master Du, I will have to ask you to pardon my discourtesy." Without even sparing a glance at the female attendant, Zhong Xian harumphed coldly before abruptly rising to his feet. He knew that there was a chance that Du Qingyuan would feign ignorance of the matter, but since this matter concerned Luo Ruoxin, even if he had to flip the entire Starchaser Palace upside down, he was determined to uncover the truth. He might still have thought twice in the past, but with 5 semi-divinities protecting him, he definitely possessed the means to force the other party to speak. He was more than willing to wait for any other matter, but for this single issue, he could not allow himself to wait any longer. "Discourtesy?" The voice beyond the veil turned wintry. "Pavilion Master Liu, are you intending to make Starchaser Palace your enemy?" "I have no intentions of doing so. All I wish is for you to satisfy this little bit of curiosity of mine, Palace Master Du," Zhong Xian replied with a wave of his hand. "Hula." The 4 semi-divinity realm beasts appeared in the room simultaneously. "Invite Palace Master Du over here." "Yes, Master." Even though the 3 sharks and the blackback tortoise were aquatic creatures, having reached their current cultivation realm, they were more than capable of surviving on land as well. It was just that their strength would be slightly crippled as a result. Hong Long. With the 4 aquatic creatures releasing their might at once, a tremendous energy burst right into the clouds. Audacious. The person on the other side of the veil clearly did not think that the new head of the 7-star pavilion would be so brazen as to make a move in her own territory. Voila! Several heavenly high immortal realm elders burst into the room, causing a powerful burst of wind to sweep inward. Send out those intruders, Zhongxian ordered calmly. Peng 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 peng. All the elders who had just entered flew outward simultaneously and crashed to the ground, sustaining severe injuries. There was simply too huge a gap between high immortals and semidivinities. Even though these aquatic creatures were only able to bring forth at most 80% of their strength on land, they were still a force far surpassing what those heavenly high immortals could deal with. Who? While Shark 1 knocked those heavenly high immortals back, Shark 2, Shark 3, and the blackback tortoise dashed forward to encircle the figure beyond the veil. With their combined strength, they swiftly bound the other party and brought her before Zhongxian. You aren't Palace Master Du Qingyuan? Who are you? Facing the young lady before him, Zhongxian questioned her with a deep frown. The young lady before him was dressed in a light purple dress, and she boasted a curvaceous figure. Her appearance was reminiscent of that of a 25 years old, so her actual age was definitely beneath 100 years. Furthermore, her cultivation was only at the lesser high immortal realm. Of course, someone of Du Qingyuan's means would be more than capable of concealing her age and cultivation, but it was obvious that the young lady before him harbored great fear of him despite the bravado that she was putting on. How could she possibly be the head of Starchaser Palace? Not to mention, Du Qingyuan was rumored to be an expert even stronger than Elder Kue Xiao. Even if she was not the strongest within the 6 sects, she would definitely rank within the top 3. Chapter 2046 Guests from the Hall of Gods. Are you trying to incite a war? The young lady roared with a reddened face. You dare wreak havoc in Starchaser Palace? Are you trying to incite a war? The young lady roared with a reddened face. She never would have thought that the newly inaugurated Pavilion Master Liu of the 7-star Pavilion would be so unreasonable, completely disregarding the etiquette between sects and capturing her without any hesitation. Zhongxian's eyebrows shot up upon hearing those words. He took a step forward imposingly and glared at the young lady coldly. I don't think your audacity is anywhere beneath mine. I earnestly sent a request for an audience with Palace Chief Du, but you tried to play me off with a mere substitute. Is this a provocation directed toward the 7-star Pavilion? Are you trying to incite a war? No matter what, he had come as a representative of the 7-star Pavilion, having made a formal request and submitted a name scroll at the entrance. Yet, it was one thing for Palace Master Du not to meet him, but they had even tried to hoodwink him with a fake. Was this not as good as making a fool out of him? It was no wonder they refused to allow Elder Kue Xiao to come along with him. It was obvious that they were taking advantage of him for being green and not knowing the real Du Qingyuan. You! The young lady trembled fearfully. She seemed to have many words on the tip of her tongue, but nothing came out of her mouth. She knew that Starchaser Palace was at fault. Where is Palace Master Du? Get her to meet me right now, and I'll drop this matter. Otherwise, if this matter blows up, none of you will be able to take responsibility. Zhongxian harumphed as he swept a threatening gaze across the room. He was not too sure of the reason, but it seemed like Du Qingyuan was unwilling to meet him. Otherwise, she would not have allowed her subordinates to play such a trick on him. Given so, it was apparent that talking would not suffice, so he chose to put up a strong front in order to force Starchaser Palace to bring out Du Qingyuan. No matter what, he was determined to acquire information regarding Luo Ruoxin. The young lady clenched her teeth tightly, but she did not say a word at all. Keeping silent, aren't we? If that's the case, I won't be standing on ceremony anymore, Zhongxian said with a wave of his hand. The 4 semi-divinity realm beasts immediately released their auras, crushing the surrounding cultivators to the ground. As powerhouses of the Sea of Exiled Stars, these 4 beasts had their hands stained with fresh blood. Their auras carried frightening killing intent that left the weaker-willed panting for breath. Pavilion Master Liu, please quell your rage. At this moment, a voice sounded from the distance. Right after, a heavenly high immortal realm old lady dressed in a robe flew into the private chamber. I am the first elder of Starchaser Palace, Zhao Yu. This young lady over here is our palace master's direct disciple, Chu Yin. Please pardon her if she has offended you in any way. Zhong Xian gazed at the old lady intently, indicating for her to go on. Palace Chief Du has some matters to attend to, so she isn't in Starchaser Palace at the moment. We feared that there might be unease if those coming here from the other sects learned of the matter, so we chose to suppress the news for the time being. I beg for pardon for this matter. First Elder Zhao Yu clasped her fist. Those words caused a frown to be etched on Zhong Xian's forehead. It should not be anything much for the head of a sect to not be in, so was there really a reason to conceal such a trivial matter? On the contrary, such a move would only lower Starchaser Palace's credibility if it was exposed, thus achieving the opposite effect. Besides, even if the head was not in, there were still many elders to attend to administrative affairs. With the mechanisms driving the daily functions of the sect still present, it was unlikely for any mishaps to occur. It was not as if other powers would send in their troops to wreak havoc as soon as they realized that the head of the sect was not around. First Elder Zhao Yu noticed Zhong Xian's doubt, and she clasped her fist with a bitter smile. We have our own reasons for coming up such a flawed solution. I humbly ask for Pavilion Master Liu's understanding. Reasons? Zhong Xian asked. Pardon me, but it isn't convenient for me to speak about this matter. Since our palace master isn't present at the moment, I would like to ask you to come back on another date, Pavilion Master Liu. Our sect has indeed made a mistake, and you can be assured that our palace master will offer you a satisfactory explanation when she return. First Elder Zhao Yu said. Zhong Xian looked intently for a moment longer to assess the sincerity of the other party's response before eventually nodding. It's fine, I don't intend to take the matters that happened today to heart. However, I would like you to inform me as soon as Palace Master Du returns to Starchaser Palace. He was just there to inquire about Luo Ruoxin. He had no intention of turning Starchaser Palace against the 7-star pavilion. Since the other party had already lowered their stance, it would only seem petty of him to continue pursuing the matter. With a wave of his hand, he returned the 4 semi-divinity realm beasts to his tamed beast sack. Farewell. After that, he turned around and left the private chamber. As soon as he returned to the guest hall, Elder Kuei Xiao immediately stood up and walked over anxiously. I felt pulsations of energy coming from where you were earlier. What happened? He was afraid that the young man before him had come to blows with Palace Master Du Qingyuan, and this had left him feeling deeply uneasy. I'll fill you in on the details once we return, Zhong Xian said instead of explaining on the spot. With this, the two of them left Starchaser Palace. However, after they had flown just a short distance away, Zhong Xian abruptly came to a halt. Pavilion Master Liu. Noticing that the young man's complexion did not look quite right, Elder Kuei Xiao asked in bewilderment, just what in the world happened earlier? Did you meet Palace Master Du? What was with that pulsation of energy earlier? It could not be that they had really come to blows, right? Pavilion Master Liu, you promised me that you wouldn't act recklessly. I didn't meet Palace Master Du. Zhong Xian shook his head. He filled Elder Kuei Xiao in on the entire story. You said that Palace Master Du wasn't in the sect, so her direct disciple impersonated her and met you in her stead. Elder Kuei Xiao was stunned by the turn of events. It was not too rare for a sect leader to be out. The fact that the two of them were at Starchaser Palace at this very moment served as a perfect example. Was there really a need for them to get someone to impersonate her? Something really felt amiss. It did not make sense for a sect with millenniums of history behind it to not know the common protocols and end up making such a foolish move. I also think that something is off. Elder Kuei Xiao, you should return to the 7-star pavilion for the time being. Meanwhile, I'll head back to Starchaser Palace to scout He situation, Zhong Xian said. No matter how he looked at it, it was clear that something was happening within Starchaser Palace. The situation that had happened just a moment ago was simply too baffling. It was something that never should have happened in the circle they were in. Palace Master Du was the only person who knew about the details regarding Luo Ruoxin's descent, so he had to find her no matter what it took. "I'll go with you," Elder Kue Xiao said worriedly. "I'm afraid that something might happen while we are away. Someone needs to be there to take charge of the situation in case something occurs," Zhongxian replied grimly. Hearing those words, Elder Kue Xiao did not insist. "All right then. You must take care. If Starchaser Palace was acting so weirdly in their own headquarters, something major must really be happening. It would indeed be unsafe if there was no semi-divinity realm cultivator in the 7-star pavilion to stand guard." Without any hesitation, Zhongxian leaped into a remote alley, and when he walked out once more, his appearance had already changed completely. He was no longer Liu Yang. After completing his disguise, he quickly made his way back to Starchaser Palace. This time, instead of walking in through the main entrance, he snuck in stealthily. His concealment would allow him to hide from semi-divinity realm experts, let alone the bunch from Starchaser Palace. It did not take him long to return to the private chamber that he had entered previously. He discreetly flew in and hid among the beams in the ceiling. The elders whom he had knocked out of the room had disappeared, and even the traces of battle had vanished. The only ones left around were Elder Zhao Yu and Chu Yin. "First Elder, this really won't do. If even Pavilion Master Liu was able to see through my disguise, those people will definitely be able to do the same," Chu Yin said worriedly. "I am able to put on my teacher's voice, but I am unable to imitate my teacher's disposition and aura. I know that it's impossible for you to imitate our palace master impeccably, but we have no other choice. We can only stall for as much time as possible," the first elder said. "I understand. What should I do then?" Chu Yin bit her lips nervously. "This is a jade token containing our palace master's zhenqi. As long as you hold it in your palm and activate it, you'll be able to bring out the aura of a semi-divinity realm cultivator, similar to that of our palace master," First Elder Zhao Yu said. "I'll try my best then." Chu Yin nodded hesitantly. She held the jade token in her grasp, and the next moment, her aura changed. It was as if she had turned into another person. Her disposition became extremely cold, keep others a distance away from her. At the same time, a power that the ordinary would not dare think of approaching burst forth from her. "No matter what happens, you might make sure to rein in your emotions. Don't worry if you find yourself in a tight spot, I'm there to support you if need be," First Elder Zhao Yu added. Before she could finish her words, a powerful aura suddenly materialized in the courtyard just in front of the private chamber. The First Elder's voice trailed to a halt as her face darkened. She hurriedly urged Chu Yin to the other side of the veil. Barely after they were done with that, a calm voice echoed across the courtyard. "May I hear Palace Master Du's decision?" A few figures walked over with deliberate footsteps. There were 5 people in total. The one leading the group was a grey-robed middle-aged man whose cultivation felt like the boundless ocean, making it nigh impossible to gauge the extent of his strength. "They." Glancing at the guests outside, Zhongxian's body trembled a little from disbelief as he murmured, "Hall of Gods." Chapter 2047. The strongest fist reigns mighty. He had crossed blows with those from the Hall of Gods twice and even slain a couple of their heavenly high immortal realm cultivators. As such, he already had a deep understanding of them. The 5 fellows in front of him emanated a unique aura that felt both sharp and disconcerting. With just a glance, there was no doubt that they were from the Hall of Gods. A semi-divinity realm cultivator accompanied by 4 heavenly high immortals. What a lineup! Zhongxian's eyes narrowed into slits. The cultivators from the Hall of Gods possessed extraordinary strength, such that even their heavenly high immortal realm cultivators wielded strength that allowed them to withstand the might of semi-divinity realm expert. As such, it did not take too much imagination to fathom just how formidable a force this group of people was. Even if Palace Master Du was there, she would probably have had difficulties dealing with them. Of course, that was not to say that she would not be able to win the battle. They were in the heart of Starchaser Palace after all, her territory. It was just a matter of how high a price she would have to pay for victory. The accumulation of the 6 sects over their thousands of years of existence was not to be underestimated. The Ascendant Cloudsword Pavilion, for example, only had one semi-divinity realm expert, Han Zhenxiu, so it might seem like the current force that Zhongxian commanded could easily overwhelm them. However, if he really dared invade the Ascendant Cloudsword Pavilion, the one who would end up dead in the very end would be him. Just the countless sword intents stored in the Compendium of Sword Wisdom would be more than enough to overwhelm his 4 semi-divinity realm beast. Not to mention, the sect was protected by the founder's god's sword intent as well. This was why the Hall of Gods dared not cross the 6 sects easily. While its strength was a notch higher than that of the 6 sects, it was not so absolute as to be able to destroy the 6 sects with ease. Of course, the 6 sects would not use these trump cards easily too, especially since most of them were only one-time use. If the Ascendant Cloudsword Pavilion tapped into the prowess of the Compendium of Sword Wisdom, it would effectively be destroying their own heritage, preventing the knowledge of the predecessors from being passed down to the later generations. For this reason, unless it was in a time of crisis, no one would think of utilizing these trump cards. For Starchaser Palace to be able to survive despite not being on friendly terms with the other 5 sects, there was no doubt that they had such trump cards as well. Just their ability to communicate with the gods was one perfect example. While it would be far too arrogant to expect the gods to fight for them, the gods might have granted them powerful artifacts in return for their offerings. I have already thought it through, and it'll be difficult for Starchaser Palace to accede to your request, replied the voice beyond the veil. Her voice was much more stable than before, carrying the weight that a sect leader should have. Difficult. The middle-aged man from the Hall of Gods chuckled lightly to himself. You should be aware that there's a limit to the patience of the Hall of Gods. If you don't grasp this opportunity now, you will have to face the consequences in the future. Is that so? There's one thing that I am very curious about that I hope you can enlighten me on. The Hall of Gods has always been a lofty existence, never interfering in the secular affairs of the Forsaken Continent. Why are you seeking out our Starchaser Palace at this juncture? There's no need for you to ask any questions. You'll know what you need to know. We are just carrying out the orders of our master, the middle-aged man from the Hall of Gods replied without the slightest change in his expression. Don't delude yourself. The Hall of Gods always gets what it wants. Even if you turn us down, we have plenty of means to achieve our goals. The only reason we gave you a day to consider the matter is because we don't wish to dye your beautiful island crimson. I advise you not to test us. There was a brief moment of silence in the air before the voice beyond the veil sounded once more. I don't deny it. We won't stand a chance against the powerful Hall of Gods. However, if you make such a big move, the lofty reputation of the Hall of Gods will be tarnished. Are you worrying about us? The middle-aged man from the Hall of Gods burst into laughter. Reputation means nothing to existences like us. Even without it, who would dare question our authority? Starchaser Palace might have its trump cards, but make no mistake, it wouldn't take us too much effort to crush you beneath our feet. Reputation was only important between equal existences. To behemoths whose every footstep quaked the world, what did the mere opinions of ants count for? Before absolute strength, those doubtful voices meant nothing at all. What airs the Hall of Gods is putting on? Zhongxian clenched his fists tightly as he gazed upon the happenings from above. Those words sounded very jarring to his ears, but he knew that there was a sliver of truth in them. It reminded him of the Manchu, in his previous life. Those who dared keep their hair would not be able to keep their heads. Through absolute force, they forced the territories that they annexed to bow to their culture. It was clear that this was the stance that the Hall of Gods was going with. This was a world where the strongest fist reigned mighty. Do you really intend to make a move against Starchaser Palace? The person beyond the veil clearly did not expect to hear such words, and her voice began to quaver a little. We don't need to make a move personally. All we have to do is kill you, the backbone of Starchaser Palace, and I believe that there will be many sects who will be more than willing to deal the finishing blow so that they can replace you, the middle-aged man from the Hall of Gods pointed out coldly. If Starchaser Palace lost its semi-divinity realm expert, it would gradually lose its say in the matters of the world, and it would be forced to compromise again and again. Eventually, it would come to a point where it fell out of the top echelon. This was simply reality. You. The person beyond the veil fell silent. A moment later, she said, I'm willing to make compromises, but the item you requested is the foundation of our Starchaser Palace. Even I don't have the right to make such a decision individually. What Palace Master Do means to say is, give me another day. I'll discuss the matter with the elders of the sect and give you a satisfactory answer tomorrow, the person beyond the veil said. You want another day? The middle-aged man from the Hall of Gods sneered coldly. Even if I give you another day, I doubt that a fake like you will gain the authority to make the call. Isn't that so? Hula. Right after those words were spoken, a surge of sword chi burst forth and sliced the veil in two, revealing Chu Yin's silhouette. You. Seeing that she had been exposed, Chu Yin's body trembled in fear. She had thought that her impersonation was close enough to fool the other party, but it seemed like the other party did not fall for it at all. Are you wondering how I knew that you were a fake? The middle-aged man from the Hall of Gods harumphed coldly. Chu Yin could not help but clench her fists tightly as she stared anxiously at the person before her, and First Elder Zhao Yu's body stiffened in horror as well. Yesterday, when Palace Master Du said that she would give me an answer a day later, I knew what you lot were up to. Did you really take us, the warriors of the Hall of Gods, for fools? The middle-aged man scoffed. I was just playing along with you to see how far you'd go. That being said, I must admit that I am impressed. Despite your young age, you can impersonate Du Qingyuan rather well. I can tell that you have put quite a bit of effort into it. If you knew from the start, then. Chu Yin was taken aback. Since they had known right from the start, why did they still agree to give them an additional day to discuss the matter? Why did they choose to reside in Starchaser Palace for another day instead of forcing them to hand over the artifact? It's very simple. I wanted you to hand the item over yourselves. We already knew of Du Qingyuan's departure, and we have dispatched our men to deal with her. Most likely, that palace master of yours has either been captured or killed, the middle-aged man replied. The reason we chose to stay here is just to numb you all. Did you really think that such cheap ploys would work on us? Chu Yin and First Elder Zhao Yu's faces turned utterly pale as they subconsciously retreated several steps. If that was the case, did it not mean that their palace master was in danger? 1. The Manchu, who ruled over China during the Qing dynasty, had a unique hairstyle for males where they would shave the front and leave a ponytail at the back. Those who have watched Return of the Pearl Princess, Empresses in the Palace, or Story of Yanxi Palace might find them familiar. Chapter 2048 The Warriors of the Hall of Gods. Seeing that words were unnecessary at this juncture, the middle-aged man waved his hand and ordered, capture them all. The 4 heavenly high immortals behind him immediately marched forward. Protect the First Elder. In response, more than a dozen heavenly high immortal realm elders rushed into the private chamber from all directions. 3 minutes later, all the elders from Starchaser Palace were lying on the ground, every single one of them incapacitated. Despite being fellow high immortals, the warriors from the Hall of Gods were simply much more powerful than ordinary sect elders. They simply were not on the same footing as one another, so the outcome of the battle was decided right from the start. At the same time, Chu Yin and First Elder Zhao Yu were captured as well. Bring them back. It would be best if we can capture Du Qingyuan, but if they fail, we'll use these two as hostages to force her to submit, the middle-aged man ordered before turning around to leave. Meanwhile, Zhongxian slowly drove his zhengqi as he prepared to make his move to save the crowd from Starchaser Palace from the hands of the Hall of Gods. He had refrained from making a move so far in hopes of seeing what trump cards the group from the Hall of Gods was capable of. After all, this was the first time that he would be facing a semi-divinity realm expert from the Hall of Gods, so he knew that he should only make a move when he was confident of victory. Otherwise, not only would he be unable to save the rest, he would also place himself in deep danger. Unfortunately, the group from Starchaser Palace never managed to force the semi-divinity realm expert into making a move. Despite the uncertainties involved, Zhongxian knew very well that he could not allow the Hall of Gods to take away these people. For one, it would put Du Qingyuan in danger, and that would make it difficult for him to acquire the information he required. Not to forget, he had a grudge with the Hall of Gods. He was not too sure what the Hall of Gods was up to yet, but there was no harm getting in the way of what they were doing. Zhongxian discreetly took out the Tongzhang sword and the other 4 heavenly high immortal tier swords. He was intending to quickly assassinate the 4 heavenly high immortal realm cultivators from the Hall of Gods before focusing on the semi-divinity realm expert. But before he could make a move, a sharp gust of wind sounded from the distance, and right after, an overwhelming pressure crushed down on the private chamber. Another semi-divinity realm cultivator? Zhongxian's eyebrows shot up. He quickly halted his circulation of zhenqi and continued concealing his aura. Who is it? The middle-aged man from the Hall of Gods also noticed the intruder, and he quickly scanned his surroundings intently. A warm and soothing voice filled the air. "Friend, don't you think you are going too far a little? I'll have to ask you to free those from Starchaser Palace." Following that, an old man dressed in green descended upon the entrance of the private chamber before making his way in. This old man appeared to be in his 60s, and he had a flowing beard that gave him a sagely presence. Just like what Zhongxian had perceived earlier on, his cultivation was at semi-divinity realm, and his aura felt incredibly deep, reminiscent of peering into the abyss. It was likely that he was stronger than even Han Jianqiu. Is he from the evanescent immortal sect? Zhongxian frowned. He had met 4 heads of the 6 sects thus far, leaving only the faces of Palace Master Du and the sect leader of the evanescent immortal sect a mystery to him. The only reason Shark 1, Shark 2, Shark 3, and the blackback tortoise were able to achieve a breakthrough was due to the godblood, and given the nature of the Hall of Gods, it was not too surprising for them to have semi-divinity realm cultivators in their ranks. Other than them, the heads of the 6 sects should have been the only semi-divinities in this world. It was clear that the old man who had just appeared was not an ally of the Hall of Gods, and bewilderment could be seen reflected in the eyes of Chu Yin and First Elder Zhao Yu. So, the only one that was left was the head of the evanescent immortal sect. The middle-aged man from the Hall of Gods harumphed coldly. "You want me to free them? You'll have to prove yourself worthy of uttering those words first." "Who?" 2 of the heavenly high immortals from the Hall of Gods raised their swords and drove them right toward the old man. Even though the 2 of them did not intentionally coordinate with one another, their sword intents seemed to fuse together, producing a force that ripped a void in the space before them. In terms of mastery of swordsmanship, these 2 would not pale in comparison to First Elder He Tian and the others from the Ascendant Cloud Sword Pavilion. Sensing the pressure produced by those 2, Zhongxian could not help but clench his fists tightly. He had made great advancements in his cultivation recently, making him nearly invincible among all high immortals. Nevertheless, he had to admit that the might produced by the 2 of them was indeed formidable. If used well, it could have potentially forced him into a corner. Even a semi-divinity realm beast like the blackback tortoise would have some difficulties dealing with it. Thus, Zhongxian focused his attention on the old man, wanting to see how the latter would deal with a situation like this. "Who?" In his eyes, he could see a hint of a smile creeping onto the lips of the old man as he made a move. The old man raised his palm and waved it lightly. Peng! Peng! The 2 heavenly high immortals from the Hall of Gods were immediately sent crashing heavily onto the ground. Their faces turned ghastly pale as fresh blood spurted from their lips. It was just a single move, but those 2 had already sustained severe injuries. Zhongxian widened his eyes. He had thought that the old man was only slightly stronger than Han Jianqiu, but it turned out that he was underestimating the other party a great deal. It was hard to believe that what had appeared to be nothing more than an ordinary wave of a hand boasted such unbelievable might. After knocking out the 2 heavenly high immortals, the old man quickly advanced toward the other 2 heavenly high immortals holding Chu Yin and First Elder Zhao Yu before waving his hand lightly once more. It was a deceptively simple move consisting of innumerable transformations. The 2 heavenly high immortals tried to retaliate, but everything they tried was easily countered. Peng peng! With another 2 hollow thuds, those 2 were sent crashing onto the ground as well with severe injuries. Judging from their wounds, they would not be able to participate in the battle in the short term. "There's no need to worry anymore," the elder said with a smile as he freed Chu Yin and First Elder Zhao Yu from the energy binding them with a flick of his finger. You have our deepest gratitude for saving our lives. The two of them hurriedly bowed deeply. It's what I should do, the old man replied with a faint smile before finally turning his gaze toward the middle-aged man standing in the room. You can make your move. You aren't too weak after all, the middle-aged man remarked with narrowed eyes. He did not expect that the intruder would actually have the ability to incapacitate his heavenly high immortal realm subordinates so easily. Even he would have taken some time before he could incapacitate them. Before he could give this matter any deeper thoughts, the old man before him had already begun charging right toward him. In response, the middle-aged man darted forward to receive his blows. Boom, boom, boom. The duel between the two semidivinities caused innumerable rifts to appear in the surrounding space. It was fortunate that there was a formation protecting the private chamber, or else the whole of Starchaser Island would have been riddled with innumerable holes by the time they were done with their battle. Zhongxian knew that it was hard to come by a battle involving two such powerful experts, so he activated his eye of insight and observed the situation closely. The middle-aged man's moves were sharp, forceful, and fatal, but the old man was able to deflect them through ingenious maneuvers. In a few moments, they were already engaged in an intense fight against one another, and surprisingly, they seemed to be equally matched with one another. But why do the moves executed by this old man seem so familiar to me? Zhongxian pondered with a frown. The moves of the old man appeared to be simple on the surface, but they were all aimed at the crux of his opponent, making them incredibly hard to defend against. It was clear that the old man lost out to the middle-aged man in terms of strength and Junshi purity, but as the battle continued, it was the middle-aged man who was forced back again and again. It was clear who was in an advantageous position by now. The old man's battle techniques are a little similar to the simplified Heaven's Path battle techniques, consisting of the condensation of profound concepts within simple moves in order to draw out greater prowess in battle, Zhongxian thought. Slowly, he realized that the feeling of déjà vu stemmed from the similarities in their battle techniques. His fighting style was also centered around searching for and striking his enemy's weaknesses. It looks like he's going to win. Zhongxian nodded. Barely after such a thought appeared in Zhongxian's head, the middle-aged man from the Hall of Gods was struck squarely in his chest, forcing him to retreat several steps. You be *starred. Let's see how you will deal with this then. With a furious roar, the middle-aged man took out a sword and channeled his sword chi into it before charging forward at an incredible speed. Judging from the momentum, this seemed to be the strongest move that the middle-aged man had in his arsenal. He was determined to bring down the old man with this. With a grim look on his face, the old man was just about to make his move as well when the silhouettes before him abruptly blurred. The middle-aged man, along with the four heavenly high immortals, vanished from view simultaneously. I'll spare you this once. Pray that you never meet me again. With those words lingering in the air, the group from the Hall of Gods escaped from Starchaser Palace. This. Taken aback by the use of such a cheap feint from the lofty Hall of Gods, the old man chuckled quietly beneath his breath before shaking his head lightly. He flew into the air to observe the surroundings a while, and only after confirming that the group from the Hall of Gods had left the area did he return back to Chu Yin and First Elder Zhao Yu's side. Elder, thank you for saving our lives. The two of them clasped their fists and bowed deeply. There's no need to stand on ceremony. I only came to lend my aid to Starchaser Palace under the orders of our Hall Master, the old man replied with a smile. Hall Master. The two of them glanced at one another in confusion for a moment. The first elder clasped her fist once more and asked, May I have the honor of knowing your name and the sect you are from? As the first elder of Starchaser Palace, Zhao Yu knew all the top experts from the 6 sects. Yet, she did not recognize the old man before her. Furthermore, despite being a semi-divinity realm cultivator, the other party still was not the leader of the power he was in. Just how formidable would the organization behind him be? Of course. I am Fu Chunzi, the old man said with a hint of pride as he stroked his beard. I am an elder from the Ethereal Hall. The Ethereal Hall? Chu Yin and First Elder Zhao Yu were taken aback. Despite all their guesses, They did not think that the old man would actually be from the ethereal hall. Zhongxian was taken aback as well. He knew that the ethereal hall founded by Kong Shi was filled with many experts, but who could have known that the semi-divinity realm experts in their ranks would actually be this powerful? As expected of a power that had received an entire god character. Indeed. Elder Fu Chunzi nodded. Hall Master Kong has been keeping a close eye on the movements of the Hall of Gods, and noticing that it was intending to lay its hands on Starchaser Palace, he sent me here as support. It is truly fortunate that I came in time, or else the consequences would have been dire. It's indeed a huge relief. Elder Fu, I'll have to trouble you to relay our gratitude to Hall Master Kong as well. First Elder Zhao Yu clasped her fist. You are too courteous, Fu Chunzi replied with a nod. Switching to a more serious look, he looked at First Elder Zhao Yu and said with a hint of confusion, the Hall of Gods has always steered clear of secular affairs. Pardon me, but may I know the reason they have chosen to approach Starchaser Palace at this juncture? This. First Elder Zhao Yu hesitated a little. Noticing the look of difficulty on the other party's face, Fu Chunzi added, treat it as if I never asked that question if it's not convenient for you to speak. It's just that I'm a little worried about Palace Master Du. It'll be hard for me to make a move without knowing the exact details of the current situation. First Elder Fu is our savior. Chu Yin looked at First Elder Zhao Yu. Their current priority should be to save their Palace Master. There was no way they would be able to do it with their current strength, so they could only rely on the old man before them. Thus, Chu Yin could not understand why First Elder Zhao Yu was still hesitating at this moment despite their current plight. I guess we have no other choice. First Elder Zhao Yu nodded with a wry smile. Since Elder Fu is an expert from the ethereal hall, there's no harm in filling him in on the details. Even though the ethereal hall was a mysterious entity on the Forsaken Continent, it had always moved with the interests of the continent at heart. There had never been any rumors about it being affiliated with the Hall of Gods, and it had never acted improperly. As such, it should be safe to assume that the other party was trustworthy. In truth, the Hall of Gods has approached our Starchaser Palace in hopes of obtaining our greatest treasure. Your greatest treasure? Fu Chunzi asked with a frown. Indeed. It's the altar that Starchaser Palace uses for its rituals, First Elder Zhao Yu explained. Chapter 2049 City of Collapsed Space Altar? Fu Chunzi's eyebrows shot up. The reason Starchaser Palace was deeply feared by the other sects was due to its ability to communicate with the gods through its rituals. Such rituals would require not just appropriate offerings but an altar to hold the offerings as well. To think that the Hall of Gods would attempt to take this away from Starchaser Palace. The altar is the very foundation of Starchaser Palace, so how could we give it away to others easily? Thus, our Palace Master tasked us with the responsibility of stalling for time while she finds a suitable place to hold a ritual in order to report this matter to the gods so that they can redress our grievances. Chu Yin explained. I see. Fu Chunzi nodded in realization. Hiding on the beams in the ceiling, Zhongxian's eyes widened in comprehension as well. He had been wondering why Starchaser Palace would have a disciple impersonate Du Qingyuan all along, and this turned out to be the real reason. With the Hall of Gods keeping a close eye on Starchaser Palace, there was no way it would allow Du Qingyuan to hold a ritual to report the incident to the gods. Thus, the latter could only find a remote location to conduct the ritual. In order to buy time for her, they chose to have Chu Yin impersonate her in hopes that the Hall of Gods would not notice anything amiss. It was just a pity that the Hall of Gods seemed to have seen through them right from the start. Elder Fu, it's likely that my teacher is still being pursued by the warriors of the Hall of Gods. I beseech you to save her. Chu Yin kneeled down and implored. I will not hesitate to help her if I am able to, Fu Chunzi replied grimly. However, you'll have to tell me where she has headed to and where she intends to hold the ritual. Or else, I'm afraid that there's nothing I can do. This. Knowing the severity of the matter, Chu Yin looked at First Elder Zhao Yu, and the two of them fell into deep thought. Their palace master's destination was confidential, and the latter had instructed them not to tell anyone prior to her departure. The Hall of Gods has already uncovered your goal, and most likely, They have already dispatched their men to apprehend Palace Master Du. She's likely in deep danger. I won't be able to help her until I know where she currently is, Fu Chunzi said grimly. I believe you should know better than anyone the importance of Palace Master Du and the altar to Starchaser Palace. If you lose both of them, there's a good chance that Starchaser Palace will fall to ruin. This is not something that the Ethereal Hall wishes to see. Chu Yin and First Elder Zhao Yu clenched their fists tightly. They knew that there was some truth in what Fu Chunzi had said. Losing their altar would be as good as losing their greatest trump card. That would be equivalent to the Ascendant Cloud Sword Pavilion losing its God's Sword intent. If something happened to their Palace Master at such a time, Starchaser Palace would definitely fall into turmoil. The aquatic creatures that it had offended over the years would make use of this opportunity to massacre everyone on Starchaser Island. Thus, no matter what happened, they had to make sure to protect their Palace Master and the altar. First Elder Zhao Yu hesitated for a moment longer before carefully speaking. Elder Fu, it's not that we don't trust you, but revealing the whereabouts of our Palace Master can have severe consequences. We have to consider this matter carefully. Fu Chunzi looked at the two of them silently for a moment before slowly nodding. Since this is the will of Starchaser Palace, I'll keep my hands out of this matter and return to the Ethereal Hall. Following which, he turned around to leave the private chamber. The abrupt departure of Fu Chunzi caused First Elder Zhao Yu to panic. She hurriedly exclaimed, "Please wait for a moment. If something really happened to their Palace Master, this old man before them was their greatest hope. If he left just like that, there was a good chance that their Palace Master might really lose her life in the hands of the Hall of Gods." Fu Chunzi halted his footsteps and looked at the duo. "Elder Fu, may I see your identity token?" First Elder Zhao Yu asked carefully. "I understand your apprehension." "That isn't a problem at all," Fu Chunzi replied as he whipped out a token. Inscribed on the back of the token were the characters _ethereal. These characters carried a deep conceptualization behind them, such that even painters at Zhongxian's caliber would not be able to imitate the calligraphy. It's indeed the Elder Token of the Ethereal Hall. First Elder Zhao Yu visibly heaved a sigh of relief. "Thank you, Elder Fu." Chu Yin and First Elder Zhao Yu clasped their fists as they voiced their gratitude. "I should follow him to take a look." With such a thought in mind, Zhongxian drifted out of the private chamber like a light gust of wind before quickly heading in the direction that Fu Chunzi disappeared. His goal at Starchaser Palace was to find Du Qingyuan to uncover the truth behind Luo Ruoxin. Since the latter was likely in the city of collapsed space, there was a need for him to make his way over there as well. Otherwise, if the latter was killed before he could even meet her, he would really lose the final clue linking him to Luo Ruoxin. Fu Chunzi's traveling speed was formidable. By the time Zhongxian left Starchaser Palace, the other party had already completely vanished from sight. Eye of insight. The next moment, the slight disturbances in the air that Fu Chunzi left behind as a result of his movements appeared clearly before Zhongxian's eyes. Zhongxian hurriedly followed the trail. It did not take him long before he was out of the perimeters of Starchaser Island. As he proceeded, several more trails appeared before his eyes. It seemed like there were a few others trailing Fu Chunzi as well. "These trails are from those 5 fellows from the Hall of Gods. Weren't they incapacitated by Fu Chunzi earlier?" Zhongxian frowned. Did they use some kind of secret art that allowed them to swiftly recover? In any case, the fact that they were following Fu Chunzi did not bode well. "I have to quicken my pace," Zhongxian thought anxiously. Whether those 5 had been camping in wait to follow Fu Chunzi to where Du Qingyuan was or something else, one thing was for sure: Du Qingyuan's whereabouts had already been leaked to the Hall of Gods. Knowing that his speed was severely lacking compared to those semi-divinity realm experts, Zhongxian quickly brought out Shark One and urged it to rush forward. Half a day later, after traveling for over 1,000,000 li, the trail suddenly vanished. Zhongxian instructed Shark One to come to a halt and return to the tamed beast sack before he began examining the surroundings. He was in the midst of a barren desert. Yellow sand filled his entire sight, and it seemed as if there was no end to it. The trail stops here. Could it be that the city of collapsed space lies within the yellow sand? Zhong Xian wondered. The fact that the trail stopped there likely meant that he was not too far from the city of collapsed space anymore. Thus, he tried to recall the details regarding the city of collapsed space from the books. The city of collapsed space is an ancient domain that has existed ever since the time where the indigenous population ruled the entire forsaken continent. It's hidden amid a vast desert. Zhong Xian hurriedly sieved through all the information in his head. The books in the Ascendant Cloud Sword Pavilion, Myriad Beasts Hall, and Seven-Star Pavilion all had some records regarding that place. It should be in the vicinity then. Zhong Xian surveyed the area around him, and all of a sudden, his eyebrows shot up. He began walking in a certain direction, and before long, he was standing before a sand dune. To the naked eye, it would seem as if there was nothing peculiar about this place. However, if one perceived the surroundings carefully, one would feel a prehistoric aura hidden beneath the yellow sand. A world that had vanished from the eyes of the world was hidden under his feet. Zhong Xian slowly took a walk around the sand dune as he carefully examined it. Then, he took a step forward toward it and stomped his feet down forcefully. Hoo! A powerful suction force appeared, causing him to instantaneously fall through space. Zhong Xian quickly steadied his figure before breaking his fall to float in the air. By the time he looked at his surroundings once more, he found that he was no longer in the desert anymore. Right before his eyes was a massive, dilapidated city suffused with a breath of history. It was almost as if he had stepped into a brand new world. The area was completely barren. There were no plants thriving in the area, and beneath him was a murky swamp. It felt as if he would have been swallowed whole if he had fallen in earlier. This is the city of collapsed space. Zhong Xian's expression turned grave. He had long heard that this place was fraught with dangers, and from the looks of it, that was indeed the case. What was surprising to him was that he had envisioned the city of collapsed space to be an actual place on the forsaken continent, but it turned out to be in a folded space in the desert instead. He quickly took a sweeping gaze around him. The path that he had entered through had already vanished without a trace. Even with his sensitivity toward space, he was unable to find any traces of it. In other words, he was trapped in the city of collapsed space. He had to find a different exit if he wanted to get out of there. I'll just have to deal with it when I get to that. For now, I should focus my efforts on finding Du Qingyuan, Zhong Xian thought as he tossed aside all of his negative emotions. Looking at the massive city before him, he slowly made his way in. Wang. Before he could even reach the city, he suddenly felt a bone-chilling sensation behind him. The next instant, a surge of sword qi burst out of the marsh toward his chest. At the same time, another burst of sword qi fell from the ceiling. It was clear that these two were coordinating with one another to kill him in a single move. An ambush. Zhong Xian narrowed his eyes slightly. He had been so focused on following Fu Chunzi that he did not expect that he would fall into an ambush here. Chapter 2050 The Disdainful Clone, The Hall of Gods, Huh? Zhong Xian immediately identified his assailants. The disconcerting killing intent and the sharp precision that seemed as if it had been carefully measured with a ruler, these were traits that were unique to the sword practitioners of the Hall of Gods. More importantly, the angle, positioning, and attack timing that they had coordinated with one another were truly sharp, such that even semi-divinity realm experts would find it hard to avoid their offense. The only ones he could think of that were capable of such a feat were those from the Hall of Gods. Only two heavenly high immortals, eh? Zhong Xian heaved a sigh of relief. 10 days ago, he would have been completely helpless against such a lineup, but to the current him, they were no longer a problem for him to deal with anymore. However, while there were only these two on the surface, there was no saying that the semi-divinity realm middle-aged man was not lying in wait around as well. Thus, Zhong Xian sent a telepathic message to the 4 semi-divinities in his tamed beast sack to prompt them to be ready to strike at any moment. At the same time, he brought out the Tongshang sword and released the God's sword intent to seal away the surroundings. God's sword intent. You are the new sect leader of the Ascendant Cloud Sword Pavilion, Zhong Xian? Those two assailants were alarmed, and the one above immediately turned tail to flee. If the young man before them was still at heavenly true immortal realm, he would have given it his all to take him down. However, the young man had already reached high immortal realm. Taking into consideration that the previous 2 assassinations had failed as well, it did not take him long to figure out that the opponent standing before them was not someone whom they could defeat. What he had to do right now was inform their leader of the news as soon as possible. If he could capture this young man, the merit he would earn would be far greater than acquiring the altar of Starchaser Palace. It's too late, Zhong Xian remarked lightly. Zhong Xian's sword descended like a gust of wind. It appeared to be slow on the surface, but that single move effectively sealed away all his routes of escape. He was trapped. Pu. A blooded slit appeared on the glabella of the heavenly high immortal above, and just like that, his soul dissipated, sealing his fate. Who? Zhong Xian quickly grabbed his falling corpse and threw it into his storage ring. All in all, from the moment those 2 attempted to assassinate him till the heavenly high immortal above was killed, not even a single breath had passed. At the same time, though, the sword chi from the heavenly high immortal below had arrived right before him. Ding! Just as it seemed as if the sword chi was going to pierce through Zhong Xian's chest, a gourd suddenly materialized right before him and blocked the sword chi. Damn it! Break! With gritted teeth, the heavenly high immortal below drove his zhenqi to his limits, hoping to pierce through the gourd. However, it was as if the gourd was as resilient as a fortified city wall. Even when pouring in his full strength, he was still unable to breach it. Could that be a semi-divinity artifact? The heavenly high immortal jolted in fear. He was at the heavenly high immortal realm, and the sword in his hand had reached the same tier. Given so, it should have been impossible for any heavenly high immortal tier artifact to stop his attack. Yet, a mere gourd managed to block him from advancing any further. He dared not imagine just what tier the artifact was at. It's impossible. There's no way I can defeat a monster like this. I need to get away right now. Knowing that it was impossible for him to pull off the assassination alone, he immediately turned tail. But before he could even turn around, his vision suddenly went dark. A gourd was flying right toward his face. With just a single strike, the shape of the gourd was imprinted right into the head of the heavenly high immortal. With indignation reflected in his eyes, his body began falling helplessly downward. To think that a heavenly high immortal realm expert like him would die to a mere gourd. Who? Zhong Xian quickly threw his body into his storage ring as well. Despite having defeated 2 heavenly high immortals, he did not show the slightest hint of joy. Instead, he scanned his surroundings warily. A few breaths passed, but there were no movements at all. Slowly, Zhong Xian heaved a sigh of relief. It seems like these 2 are the only ones lying in ambush. There was a possibility that the entire group that he had encountered earlier would be lying in wait for him, but since they had not appeared after so long, it appeared that there was no one else. Otherwise, they surely would have exploited the opening that he had shown while he was dealing with those 2 heavenly high immortals to strike. These 2 might have been left behind to serve as sentries to alert them in case anything happens. If that's the case, the others must have gone on ahead to find Du Qingyuan and the altar. He pondered for a moment before nodding slightly. I made sure to seal the surrounding space before killing these 2, so I doubt that any energy pulsation or information has managed to get out. If so, the others shouldn't have noticed my presence yet. Who? An identical figure swiftly appeared by his side. It was his clone. After taming those 4 semi-divinity realm beasts, he had passed some of their blood along to Vicious and his clone. Due to the lack of a cultivation technique, Zhong Xian was unable to continue his cultivation. However, such a problem did not apply to his clone, and the latter had already reached the heavenly high immortal realm. Needless to say, his clone was stronger than him yet again. You'll take one while I'll take the one, Zhong Xian said. All right. Catching Zhong Xian's drift, his clone nodded. The next moment, he had already morphed his appearance to match the heavenly high immortal who had his head smashed in with a gourd. While his clone did not have a disguise amulet, the 9 Hearts Lotus granted his body a property reminiscent of water. He could freely morph into any form that he wanted. That was also why he could easily reform his body even when it had been dented inward. After changing his appearance, His clone quickly put on the other party's clothes before suppressing the pulsation of his soul energy to the minimum. On the other hand, Zhongxian took on the appearance of the other warrior. With 2 light taps of his finger, he made the 2 swords of the heavenly high immortals submit to him. His disguise was flawless, such that it was impossible for one to see through even if one checked his bloodline. However, there was still some degree of discrepancy regarding his clone's disguise, such as his soul aura. Nevertheless, the mere fact that they were holding onto the swords of the 2 heavenly high immortals should be enough to make up for that. Heavenly high immortal tier artifacts were known to possess their own spirits, making them extremely hard to tame. As long as they saw that they were wielding the swords of the 2 heavenly high immortals, it was unlikely that they would conduct a thorough check. After they were done, Zhongxian double-checked their disguises and made some additional adjustments. It was only when he was unable to see any more loopholes that he finally gave a nod of approval. He took the lead forward, and his clone quickly followed behind him. In order to ensure that these 2 heavenly high immortals would be able to find them afterward, the semi-divinity realm middle-aged man who had left earlier made sure to leave some marks behind. Thus, it was not too difficult to trace them. Proceeding ahead, it did not take too long for them to enter the ancient city. The dilapidated city walls emanated an air of degeneration, leaving one with a heavy feeling on the inside. The environment felt inexplicably stifling, leaving those walking in the area with some difficulties breathing. Even someone of Zhongxian's caliber felt his cultivation being suppressed significantly, rendering him incapable of exerting his full might. A thought came to Zhongxian's mind, and he slit a small incision on his arm. TZZZZZ. As soon as the incision was made, the air of degeneration in the surroundings immediately corroded the area of the wound, hindering his recovery. Zhongxian quickly drove his Heaven's Path Zhenqi to ward off the air of degeneration and heal his injury, but sometime later, he shook his head helplessly. Usually, such minor injuries would take less than a breath to heal up entirely. Yet, even after driving his Heaven's Path Zhenqi for a few minutes, the incision was still showing no signs of recovering at all. There was indeed something deeply unnerving about this place. It was no wonder Elder Bai Yi was unable to recover from his injuries, leaving him with no choice but to wait for his death. Most likely, it was the work of this air of degeneration. Zhongxian took out a jade bottle and poured out a bit of chicken soup on his wound, and a trail of black smoke immediately rose from it. Following that, the incision quickly healed up. It seems like I should proceed carefully here and try my best not to get hurt, Zhongxian thought grimly. Other cultivators were not as privileged as him in having little chicks broiled soup. In other words, once they got injured, their bodies would immediately be assailed by the air of degeneration, causing their injuries to progressively worsen. Eventually, they would die a tragic death. I'll pass you a bottle just in case, Zhongxian said as he tossed a bottle over to his clone. Since the Heaven's Path Zhenqi did not work for him, it was likely the same for his clone. It would be a great deal of trouble for his clone if he got injured. His clone caught the jade bottle, but he did not store it right away. Instead, he looked at Zhongxian with a disdainful expression before slicing his arm with a surge of zhenqi from his fingertip. Puha! A glaring, deep laceration immediately appeared on his clone's arm, causing fresh blood to spurt out. Zhongxian frowned upon seeing this situation. He had no idea what his clone was up to. The next moment, however, his clone began driving the zhenqi in his body. TZZZZZZZ. A trail of black smoke was expelled from the laceration, and the wound swiftly healed up as if nothing had happened in the first place. Zhongxian's eyebrows twitched. I don't need this thing. Placing his hands behind his back, his clone looked at him and shook his head. Weakling. Zhongxian. Would you die if you stopped bragging for a day? Feeling deeply stifled on the inside, Zhongxian decided to ignore his clone and proceed ahead. Despite the air of degeneration within the ancient city, there was still some lush greenery in between the ruins. It felt like a new spring was gradually setting in on this land of devastation. Life sprouting in a land of death, it was as if the world was displaying the power of nature to wash away all devastation and heal the lands. These medicinal herbs growing amid the air of degeneration possess exceptionally potent medicinal energy, and they are remarkably diverse in terms of their types. It's no wonder so many experts are drawn to the city of collapsed space despite the dangers involved. If one forged a pill out of the medicinal herbs that were found there, the pill would surely be far more potent than usual. While tracing the footsteps of those from the Hall of Gods, Zhongxian did not neglect to collect the medicinal herbs that were conveniently within his reach. Not too long later, a cluster of collapsed buildings came into sight. This place was different from what he had seen previously. The places that he had walked through earlier were tattered from the wear and tear of age, but this cluster of collapsed buildings had many fresh imprints on it. It felt as if someone had just laid waste to it. A battle has just happened here, Zhongxian remarked. With his sharp eye of discernment, he could tell that these imprints were at most an hour old. Otherwise, under the air of degeneration lingering in the area, even the fresher imprints would swiftly have become worn out, making it impossible to tell the difference. Could it be that the lot from the Hall of Gods have managed to catch up with Fu Chunzi, or did they manage to find Palace Master Du? Zhongxian wondered worriedly. The fact that there were fresh signs of a battle there meant that two parties from different factions had encountered one another. Zhongxian halted his footsteps, wanting to take a closer look at the marks to see if he could acquire any useful information from them. However, he suddenly felt cold sweat raining down his body. A powerful burst of energy had descended from above. Zhongxian quickly backed away as he brought out 6 swords to form a protective layer around his body. Ding 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 ding, a series of sounds reminiscent of the pitter-patter of rain echoed in the air. Lowering his head, Zhongxian saw a large group of black shadows diving out from the ground, like an army of specters escaping from the depths of hell. Chapter 2051 In a Demon's Flower. The dark shadows before him appeared similar to mist, as if they had no tangible form. However, their strength was not to be underestimated. They would be able to stand their ground even against Zhongxian's sword qi. With a grim look on his face, Zhongxian muttered, "Could they be degeneration beasts?" He had read about degeneration beasts in the books before. It was a unique life form in the city of collapsed space, rising and nurtured from the air of degeneration lingering in the area. They were known to be extremely vicious. Those that encountered one would find the air of degeneration seeping into their body, corroding their organs and even junqi. To make matters worse, it was nigh impossible to expel the air of degeneration from one's body. Elder Bai Yi had likely been wounded by a degeneration beast back then. "Let me see how powerful you are." After confirming the other party's identity, Zhongxian brandished his Tongzhang sword and launched dozens of surges of sword qi right toward the degeneration beasts. Waves of swords. This was a sword art that was not too difficult to grasp. As long as a cultivator had sufficient junqi, they should be able to learn it easily. But as one advanced further in this technique, one would realize that there were many technical details that one had to take note of while executing the sword art, and these details could only be refined slowly by the sword practitioner themselves through endless trial and error. As such, it was known to be one of the hardest sword arts to master. In the long history of the Ascendant Cloud Sword Pavilion, there were not many who had managed to master this technique, but Zhongxian was definitely one of them. Carrying might greater than that of ordinary heavenly high immortals, the dozens of surges of sword qi fell on the degeneration beasts. Peng peng peng. The degeneration's beasts were immediately blasted into bits, and the collapsed buildings behind them were further devastated. It doesn't seem like they are very powerful. Seeing how he was still able to kill each of them with a surge of sword qi, Zhongxian heaved a sigh of relief. However, before he could even lower his sword, the black shadows before him began wriggling once more. The dissipated degeneration beasts swiftly reformed and continued with their offense. Complete physical immunity. Zhongxian's face darkened. He did not think that these degeneration beasts would be capable of regenerating so swiftly, such that his sword qi was completely useless against them. Are they more vulnerable toward soul-related attacks? He quickly drew his soul out from his body and executed a palm strike against the degeneration beasts. Heavenly Demon Great Sorrow Palm. This was the ultimate art of ancient sage Qiu Wu, but he had modified it to be far stronger than the original. It was one of the rare battle techniques that combined physical offense with soul offense. Its prowess would be greater enhanced when executed in his soul state, allowing him to deal irreparable damage to souls. His palm strike successfully tore the degeneration beasts apart, but just like before, it took only a few breaths for them to recover fully. Zhongxian took a deep breath. He tried a few more means, but nothing was effective on the degeneration beasts. This time, he was at a complete loss. If these beasts were able to regenerate no matter what he threw at them, there was no way he would be able to defeat them. Eventually, even his seemingly boundless Zhenqi would be worn down as well. Eye of Insight. After activating the Eye of Insight, he finally saw what was wrong. Every time a degeneration beast was killed, the surrounding air of degeneration would nourish it, allowing it to regenerate and come back to life. These degeneration beasts can be said to be the very manifestation from the air of degeneration lingering in the city of collapsed space. Zhongxian widened his eyes in realization. As long as the air of degeneration continues lingering in the area, it'll be impossible to defeat these degeneration beasts. No wonder he was unable to eliminate these things despite all the means he had utilized. Rather than saying that they were beings thriving on the air of degeneration, it would be more accurate to say that they were the air of degeneration itself. Unless one completely rid the area of the air of degeneration, these beings would be indestructible. If that's the case, the only way to deal with these degeneration beasts is to distract them. He released another barrage of sword chi once more, but this time, his target wasn't the degeneration beasts but the already tattered buildings around them. Boom! Rock fragments scattered around the area as the buildings collapsed further, causing new marks to appear on them. As soon as the new marks appeared, the air of degeneration immediately concentrated around them in order to corrode them as well. Making full use of this opportunity, Zhongxian quickly slaughtered the degeneration beasts with a few bursts of Zhenqi. This time around, just as he had expected, they were not able to regenerate. More precisely, the rate of their regeneration was much slower than before. I should quickly press on. It won't take long before new degeneration beasts form, and they will be in greater quantities than before, Zhongxian remarked. There was really something weird about the city of collapsed space. Even though the new marks on freshly destroyed buildings would swiftly draw the air of degeneration to them, the problem was that this method could not be used too many times. Furthermore, as the corrosion spread, the air of degeneration would grow stronger and stronger, causing the number of degeneration beasts that lingered in the area to increase. In other words, while it was possible to escape from a crisis by breaking some of the buildings, it also meant placing those who came after in greater danger. The air of degeneration would simply grow stronger and stronger till no one was able to deal with it anymore. I really wonder where the air of degeneration originates from. This has already surpassed the comprehension of high immortals and even that of semidivinities. Zhongxian quickly shook the thought out of his head before proceeding onward. With his previous experience with the degeneration beasts, Zhongxian and his clone flew forward stealthily. They did not even dare pick the medicinal herbs on the ground anymore. After advancing for another 10 minutes, they suddenly sensed a furious outpour of Zhenqi ahead of them. It seemed like there was a fight going on. Zhongxian shot a glance at his clone before carefully proceeding forward. Circling around the wall, they saw two figures ahead of them. They were the other two heavenly high immortals who had barged into Starchaser Palace with them. Of those two, one of them had lost an arm whereas the other one had a glaring wound right across his chest. Due to the corrosion from the surrounding air of degeneration, their wounds had started festering, resulting in a pungent smell filling the entire area. To hell with you. You be *starred, I'll rip you into shreds. The two of them roared furiously as they brandished their swords against one another. They were of roughly equal strength to one another, so it was hard to tell who held the upper hand in the battle. Why are they fighting one another? Zhongxian frowned. He had thought that it would be either Fu Chunzi or Du Qingyuan, but who would have thought that these two heavenly high immortals had started fighting one another instead? Not to mention, they were even dealing such vicious blows against one another. This was hard to comprehend. Zhongxian widened his eyes and exclaimed, "No, it's likely that they have fallen into an illusory formation." He had encountered quite a few cultivators from the Hall of Gods thus far, and they were known to be perfectly rational, never allowing emotions to get in the way of their work. Yet, these two were frenziedly trying to rip one another apart, directing every attack at each other's vitals. It was clear that there was something influencing their minds. Chances were that there was an illusory formation in the area. Zhongxian quickly activated his eye of insight and scanned the surroundings, but soon, his eyebrows shot up in bewilderment. As a veteran formation master, his comprehension of formations definitely ranked among the top in the Forsaken Continent. If there was an illusory formation in the area, there would have been some disturbances in the surrounding spiritual energy. There was no way he would have missed that with his eye of insight. Yet, everything was serene in his eye of insight. There was no disturbance in the surrounding energy, and he could not find any formation flags or a formation core. Without formation flags and a formation core, it can't be an illusory formation. If so, what else could it be? Zhongxian quickly scanned the surroundings once more, and soon, his attention fell upon several uniquely patterned flowers not too far away. These flowers were dyed a bewitching red, and they were scattered around the ruins in radial symmetry. Through the eye of insight, he could see the flowers breathing in air of degeneration from the surroundings. These are inner demon's flowers. Inner demon's flower was a legendary plant that emanated a unique aura that gave birth to inner demons within one. It was similar to the blood-soaked stone in terms of effects. Under normal circumstances, however, these flowers would not take effect even if a cultivator came in close proximity to it. It would only react when it came under attack. Could it be that these cultivators launched an attack on these inner demon's flowers, leading to the flowers retaliating against them? But as warriors of the Hall of Gods, they should not be so foolish as to indiscriminately attack other life forms, especially in a place as dangerous as the city of collapsed space. No, that isn't right. Zhongxian examined the situation closely for a moment before coming to a conclusion. It's a trap someone set up beforehand, and these two simply stepped into it. He noticed several spheres of energy implanted right before these inner demon's flowers, such that if someone approached the region, these spheres of energy would swiftly blast apart, drawing the aggression of the flowers. It was likely that these two heavenly high immortals had fallen for that trick, thus landing them in their current state. Is it the doing of Du Qingyuan? Du Qingyuan knew the dangers that lurked in the city of collapsed space, but she still insisted on coming over. This suggested that she might be familiar with the environment here, and she intended to utilize it to her advantage in order to get rid of her enemies. Regardless of the truth, it's good news for me anyway. Having made sense out of the situation, Zhongxian heaved a sigh of relief. He continued ahead, but he made sure to make a detour to avoid the inner demon's flowers. However, barely after flying several meters forward, he suddenly halted. This won't do. It's a huge waste to leave just like that. Those two were going to die anyway, so I might as well just do it. With such a thought in mind, Zhongxian released dozens of surges of zhenqi into the surroundings. Wang. With a stomp of his foot, a spherical barrier appeared around the two heavenly high immortals, protecting them from the aura of the inner demon's flowers. Slowly, the two heavenly high immortals were freed from their unnatural states, and the crimson tinge in their eyes gradually faded. What happened? Just what were we doing? Regaining their wits, the two of them stopped their swords. While the two of them were still in a daze trying to figure out what had happened to them, Zhongxian, disguised as a warrior of the Hall of Gods, walked over and said, "You were fighting against one another due to the effects of the inner demon's flowers in the area." Inner demon's flowers. Realizing how close they had come to killing one another, the injured duo felt cold sweat pouring down their heads. They had heard about the fearful reputation of the inner demon's flower as well, but they had never thought that they would fall prey to it. I'm afraid that the effects of the inner demon's flowers might still be lingering in your bodies. In order to prevent the two of you from hurting anyone else, I'll have to ask you to pass your swords over to me for the time being, Zhongxian instructed firmly. Those words brought frowns to their foreheads. Hurry up. If you succumb to the inner demon's flowers once more, all of us might just end up dying here. Zhongxian berated furiously as he reached out to snatch their weapons. The two of them had already been severely weakened due to their earlier battle, so they did not even manage to react when Zhongxian snatched their weapons. Before they knew it, their weapons in his hands. You. Seeing how the other party had snatched their weapons forcefully, a displeased frown appeared on their faces. I didn't want to make such a move either. I'm doing this so that we can all get out of this darned place alive. Zhongxian chucked their swords into his storage ring before patting their shoulders to console them. Afterward, he leaped into the air and flew away, leaving the dumbfounded duo with a few last words. All right, the two of you can have fun here. Pop. The barrier that Zhongxian had set up earlier burst apart, allowing the aura of the inner demon's flowers to slip in once more. What are you doing? Sensing the changes in their states of mind, the two warriors of the Hall of Gods were completely flabbergasted. Did that fellow not go there to save them? Why would he suddenly expose them to the aura of the inner demon's flowers once more? Furthermore, what did he mean by having fun? What was fun about their situation? But those thoughts only lingered in their minds for a moment before they were brought into an illusion once more. Before long, their eyes turned red, and they began charging at one another again. Peng 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 peng. Even without weapons, they were not pulling their punches. Every single strike they dealt was deadly, such that it could take the other party's life if their moves connected. Pu. Before long, the two of them spurted a mouthful of blood and collapsed to the ground simultaneously. From the looks of it, they were already goners. Even at their deaths, they could not figure out why their comrade would leave them to kill each other after taking away their weapons. There's nothing to watch, let's go. Knowing the outcome that awaited them, Zhongxian could not be bothered to waste his time with them and proceeded straight ahead. Since they were going to die, it would be a waste to leave their weapons there. As for their corpses, he already had plenty of heavenly high immortal bodies in his storage ring, so he did not have to top up at the moment. Chapter 2052 The assault from Zhongxian and his clone. Proceeding forward, it was obvious that Zhongxian's clone had toned down quite a bit. It was not showing its usual smugness and narcissism at all. It seemed like the eeriness of the city of collapsed space had surpassed his expectations as well. It was little wonder why few would dare venture in here. Just the air of degeneration lingering in the area would already be fatal to most cultivators. Through the eye of insight and library of Heaven's path, Zhongxian was able to foresee most dangers in advance and circumvent them, thus sparing him from much trouble. Nevertheless, over the course of less than 10 li, he had still ended up being attacked thrice and nearly fallen into a trap twice. That being said, they overcame the challenges and marched on. Soon, they sensed an intense pulsation of energy just ahead of them. Zhongxian and his clone exchanged glances before stealthily advancing. A vast square came into view. On the left was a lady dressed formally with a copper mask on her face. There was an altar floating quietly not too far away from her with sky-blue flames blazing on it. It seemed like the ritual had already begun. Her hair was fluttering in the air as she infused all her zhenqi into the altar, causing the surrounding space to distort. On the right was a familiar face, the middle-aged man from the Hall of Gods. He was staring at the altar with utterly cold eyes. Fu Chunzi. Not too far away, there was a figure lying diagonally on the ground. Fresh blood was spurting from his chest, indicating the severity of his injuries. It was none other than Fu Chunzi from the ethereal hall. Zhongxian had guessed that Fu Chunzi might have encountered the middle-aged man along the way, but who could have thought that the latter would have sustained such severe injuries? Could that copper-masked lady be Palace Master Du Qingyuan? Zhongxian thought as he looked over. He could not tell what the ritual was for, but he could sense overwhelming zhenqi surging through the copper-masked lady's body. Judging from her strength, it was apparent that she had already reached the semi-divinity realm. The only lady of the 6 sects who had reached this realm was Du Qingyuan, so the person before him was likely her. The middle-aged man gazed at Fu Chunzi coldly and said, "Does your master intend to make an enemy out of the Hall of Gods as well?" Zhongxian was a little perplexed. He had not watched the entire battle earlier, but should Fu Chunzi not be stronger than the middle-aged man? It was true that anything could happen in a battle, but considering that he was joining hands with Du Qingyuan now, it was hard to believe that he would end up sustaining such a severe injury. Otherwise, could it be that the middle-aged man had intentionally admitted defeat so as to allow Fu Chunzi to lead the way? Such was not completely implausible. Through his interactions with them, he felt that the Hall of Gods was unscrupulous in the means they resorted to in order to achieve their goals, and even sacrificing themselves was not beyond them. It was not unthinkable for them to use such a ploy. If you could do anything, cough cough, to our Hall Master, you would have long made a move, one Fu Chunzi scoffed coldly as he coughed out blood. Following which, he turned to the copper-masked lady with difficulty and warned, Palace Master Du, you must be careful. He has a semi-divinity artifact with him. The copper-masked lady did not bother responding to Fu Chunzi's warning. Instead, she continued looking at the middle-aged man with cold killing intent in her eyes. Who? A massive palm that cast a shadow over the lands suddenly appeared in the sky, crushing down with incredible might. Great azure palm, not bad. The middle-aged man laughed loudly as he charged forth with a sword in his hand. Ding! Holding back the massive palm in the sky with the sword in one of his hands, he raised his other hand and thrust a palm strike right toward the nearby altar. You are courting death. The copper-masked lady spat coldly. In retaliation, she thrust a flurry of palm strikes toward the middle-aged man. As a result of her relentless attacks, the surrounding space was strained into distortion, making it seem as if the entire area was going to explode from the shockwave. However, with speed as swift as lightning, the middle-aged man was able to skillfully maneuver through her palm strikes without sustaining any damage. Palace Master Du, you seem far weaker than how the rumors made you out to be. Is it the effects of the ritual? Well, regardless of what it is, it's a fact that you aren't a match for me in your current state. Hand over your altar obediently, and I can consider sparing your life. Otherwise, don't blame me for not going easy on you. The middle-aged man smirked. Known to be one of the strongest experts of the 6 sects, Du Qingyuan's strength was so great that even the middle-aged man was not entirely confident that he would be a match for her. Yet, for some reason, even though the other party's attack seemed powerful on the surface, it felt like there was no substance behind them. Could she have depleted her strength due to the ritual and resorted to putting on an act to scare him off? In any case, this worked in his favor. As long as he could successfully obtain the altar, the contribution that he had made to the Hall of Gods would surely earn him an advancement in his cultivation. On the other hand, the copper-masked lady paid no attention to the middle-aged man's words and continued her offense. The flames burning on the altar were growing more and more brilliant by the moment, as if a connection was swiftly being forged with the firmament. Since you don't know your place, don't blame me for not going easy on you. Seeing how the copper-masked lady refused to give up on the ritual, the middle-aged man sneered coldly as he raised his palm. Who? A halberd materialized right in his hand. With a powerful leap, he pierced the halberd toward the other party furiously. Woohoo! A massive tear in space appeared along the trajectory of the halberd. After being infused with the energy of a semi-divinity realm cultivator, the tip of the halberd emanated a menacing glow, as if it would reduce anything before it to dust. A semi-divinity artifact. Zhong Xian narrowed his eyes. He could tell that the halberd was no ordinary semi-divinity artifact. Even the metal chain that he had with him was a notch weaker than it. It seemed like it was still possible for there to be huge disparities in the might of semi-divinity artifacts. Sensing the tremendous power behind the halberd, the copper-masked lady could not keep her cool anymore. With narrowed eyes, she abruptly turned her head and glanced at the altar not too far away from her. Even if I die, I'll drag you down with me. With a furious roar, she reached out toward the altar and grasped at it. Hula! The sky-blue flames on the altar shot over and formed a blazing wall of fire right in front of the copper-masked lady. If the middle-aged man wanted to get to her, he would have to first destroy the altar. However, the mission that his master had passed down to him was to acquire the altar, so the altar would have been completely useless once it had been destroyed. Thus, he could not possibly choose such a course of action. He pulled back his halberd and glared at the copper-masked lady with narrowed eyes. You darned spinster. You can rest assured that I'll destroy the altar with my own hands before I die. I'll be letting my predecessors down, but I believe that they wouldn't want to see the treasure of our Starchaser pavilion falling into the hands of a bunch of beast. Just try me. The copper-masked lady laughed manically. In terms of strength, she was definitely no match for the middle-aged man before her. To make matters worse, The middle-aged man even had a semi-divinity artifact with him. There was no way she stood a chance. Since that was the case, the least she could do was ensure that the other party did not get what he wanted. She knew that he wanted the altar, and that meant that she was able to caution him using it. Humph! With tightly clenched fists, the middle-aged man glared at the copper-masked lady with a terrifying look on his face. A moment later, however, the frown between his brows loosened, and a sadistic smile crept onto his lips. Since that's the case, perhaps I should start with him first. Hong Long. The halberd immediately changed its target toward the old man lying feebly on the ground, Fu Chunzi. Fu Chunzi's face paled. He tried to gather his strength to protect himself, but due to the severity of his injuries, he was unable to even push himself off the ground. With a desolate look on his face, he turned to the copper-masked lady and cried out, "Palace Master Du, hurry up and leave. With the altar in your hands, he won't dare make a move on you. There's no need to worry about me." The copper-masked lady clicked her tongue in irritation before grabbing the altar and dashing in front of Fu Chunzi. "Continue what you were doing if you really want the altar to be destroyed, so." "Who?" The halberd halted in midair. UB*TCH. The middle-aged man was so furious that he could have exploded on the spot. Tremendous might crackled around the halberd, causing a shockwave to ripple into the surroundings. Even though he had halted his attack, the sheer momentum of it had already caused the ground around him to crack. Peng! At this critical moment, the face of the copper-masked lady suddenly turned ghastly pale. A spurt of fresh blood escaped from her lips, and she fell forward, crashing heavily onto the ground. With a look of disbelief in her eyes, she turned around and saw the severely wounded Fu Chunzi rising to his feet, wiping away the blood trickling down his lips. "My sincere apologies, Palace Master Du. We can't afford to allow the altar to be damaged in any way, so we could only resort to trickery. I hope that you can understand where we are coming from." With a swift series of movements, Fu Chunzi extinguished the sky-blue flames on the altar and sealed it with his junchi, making it impossible for the copper-masked lady to control it anymore. After that, he stowed the altar into his storage ring. UB****, the copper-masked lady cursed furiously. Even the lofty ethereal hall has decided to bow down to the Hall of Gods as well. Never in her wildest dreams did she expect that even Fu Chunzi, who had pitted his life to protect her earlier, would actually be in cahoots with the Hall of God. Everything that had just happened was an act. Even Zhong Xian, who was hiding to the side, could not help but recoil a little at the sight. He had thought that it was weird how the middle-aged man had allowed Fu Chunzi to defeat him so easily back at Starchaser Palace. His initial assumption was that the middle-aged man was taking a step back to bait Starchaser Palace into making a move so that he could track them down and eventually get to where Du Qingyuan was. However, the issue with that hypothesis was that there was no guarantee that Fu Chunzi would be heading to where Du Qingyuan was and that Starchaser Palace would even make a move at all. After all, this was a battle of time. If Starchaser Palace could last long enough for Du Qingyuan to complete her ritual and acquire the protection of a god, the tables would be turned. The middle-aged man did not have the luxury to be wasting time on an uncertain possibility. This drew his attention to Fu Chunzi's words and actions. After all, without Fu Chunzi's intervention, the middle-aged man would not have been so successful in finding Du Qingyuan. He had a feeling that Fu Chunzi had been playing on the worries of Chu Yin and First Elder Zhao Yu back then in order to pressure them into revealing Du Qingyuan's whereabouts, and that had brought up a sliver of doubt within him that Fu Chunzi might have been working together with the Hall of Gods. However, he had swiftly tossed the notion away because he did not think that an elder of the ethereal hall would have colluded with the Hall of God. Since the altar is already in our hands, there's no reason for us to keep her alive any longer. The middle-aged man harumphed. Indeed. Fu Chunzi nodded in agreement. He channeled his energy into his palm to execute a decisive blow on the copper-masked lady, but at this crucial moment, footsteps suddenly echoed in the air. Who? Two figures appeared in the square. They were two of the four heavenly high immortals subordinated to the middle-aged man. "Have you cleared away that pest who was following us?" the middle-aged man asked nonchalantly. "That pest is extremely cunning. He seemed to know that we were lying in wait for him, so he fled before we could even make a move, one of the heavenly high immortals replied awkwardly. He fled, the middle-aged man asked with a hint of displeasure in his tone. If I'm not mistaken, that person seems to be the new head of the 7-star pavilion. It won't be too easy to get rid of him, Fu Chunzi said with a shake of his head. The new head of the 7-star pavilion, the middle-aged murmured with a frown. UN. I felt that his rise was a little too abrupt, similar to that of Hall Master Zheng Yang and sect leader Zhong Xian. As such, I tried looking into his background, but I haven't been able to gather anything so far, Fu Chunzi said grimly. However, we don't have to pay him any heed. Let's take the altar back to our master first. We'll deal with that fellow in due course. Yes, this matter takes priority. The middle-aged man nodded. He shot a glance at the copper-masked lady once more and said, let's head out after you get rid of her. Very well. Fu Chunzi nodded. The two heavenly high immortals suddenly stepped forward at this moment and said, please allow me to do it. I wish to redeem myself for failing to capture Pavilion Master Liu Yang. Following which, one of them quickly moved over to the copper-masked lady's side whereas the other one remained beside the middle-aged man. I'll leave it to you then. The middle-aged man nodded before turning around to leave the area. Who? All of a sudden, two powerful surges of sword chi burst forth simultaneously. They were directed right toward the backs of the middle-aged man and Fu Chunzi respectively. The two heavenly high immortals, who were Zhong Xian and his clone in disguise, had made their moves. The middle-aged man and Fu Chunzi were completely caught off guard by this assault, such that the sword chi pierced a gaping hole through their bodies in an instant. Not expecting their own subordinates to assault them, the faces of the middle-aged man and Fu Chunzi warped in disbelief. Chapter 2053 The Price of Bragging, Kill Him, Zhong Xian roared. Even though the middle-aged man and Fu Chunzi had been inflicted with fatal wounds, as semi-divinity realm experts, if they were allowed to regain their footing, they would still be able to bring devastating might upon them in an instant. Thus, Zhong Xian unhesitatingly opened his tamed beast sack. Voila! The semi-divinity metal chain immediately flew forth and bound the middle-aged man tightly. At the same time, the blackback tortoise and Shark 3 charged toward the middle-aged man whereas Shark 1 and Shark 2 moved to support Zhong Xian's clone in dealing with Fu Chunzi. While their strength was diminished on dry land, the fighting prowess they displayed was still extremely terrifying. In an instant, many blooded punctures appeared all over the middle-aged man, and his arms were jolted apart by the powerful body tackle. Everything happened so abruptly that the middle-aged man was overwhelmed by the current situation. Nevertheless, he swiftly recovered from his shock and made his move. With powerful killing intent gushing out of him, he summoned his halberd to knock away 3 semi-divinities encircling him. Puha! Unfortunately for him, the movements of his halberd abruptly came to a halt as a heavenly high immortal realm corpse suddenly blocked its way. Clenching his fists tightly, the middle-aged man willed his halberd to pierce right through the corpse and come to his aid, but before that could be done, a tremendous of energy abruptly bubbled within the corpse. Boom! The corpse blew apart, causing the halberd to be jolted back by the shockwave. It wavered uncontrollably in the air as it struggled to regain its balance in the midst of the frightening gale. The semi-divinity halberd was indeed a force to be reckoned with, but the sheer force from the explosion from a heavenly high immortal still jolted its spirit, confusing its senses for a moment. It took it quite a lot of effort for the halberd's spirit to regain itself, but just as it was about to rush forward to help, another corpse appeared and exploded right in its face. After facing 3 consecutive exploding corpses, the halberd spirit finally reached its limit and fell from the sky. It seemed like it would temporarily be incapacitated. These explosions did not cause any harm to the semi-divinity halberd at all, but the spirit inside had already been worn out, such that it was no exaggeration to say that the weapon had been ruined. Meanwhile, the middle-aged man was continuously being struck by the 4 semi-divinity beasts. Finally, with a decisive ram from the blackback tortoise, his head sank into his shoulders, and his body fell to the ground with a loud thump. All in all, from the moment that the battle started to the moment that the middle-aged man dropped dead, only 3 breaths had passed. It was indeed an incredible feat to be able to defeat a semi-divinity realm expert from the Hall of Gods within 3 breaths, But one had to know that Zhongxian had expended 3 heavenly high immortal corpses and mobilized a semi-divinity artifact and 2 semi-divinity realm beasts for this battle. Zhongxian was probably the only person in the world who could make such an extravagant move. While they were dealing with the middle-aged man, over on the other side, Shark 1, Shark 2, and the clone were charging right toward the collapsed Fu Chunzi. It did not matter whether Fu Chunzi was from the ethereal hall or the Hall of Gods. Since he had already bared his fangs at Du Qingyuan, there was no need for them to hold back. Who? The clone rushed right up to Fu Chunzi and wrapped the latter tightly in his embrace, making sure to lock all his joints so as to prevent him from moving. Meanwhile, Shark 1 and Shark 2 rained ferocious attacks down upon the old man. Zhongxian flicked his wrist to bring out 7 heavenly high immortal tier swords, and these swords swiftly moved to encircle the other party, forming what was reminiscent of a silvery net around him. FSH 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 FSH. Sword chi rained down on Fu Chunzi furiously. Before he could even recover his footing in the battle, his body had been sliced apart, leaving slabs of meat and a pool of fresh blood on the spot where he had formerly existed. Zhongxian had not bided his time in vain. He had observed the earlier battle carefully and analyzed all the weaknesses of Fu Chunzi and the middle-aged man, which had allowed him to design a plan that would allow him to take these 2 semi-divinity realm experts down swiftly with the least cost. Seeing that everything had worked out fine, he heaved a sigh of relief. His glance moved toward Fu Chunzi's corpse as he murmured, "Did this fellow betray the ethereal hall?" Having used the Library of Heaven's Path to check on Fu Chunzi, there was no doubt that the latter was an elder of the ethereal hall. If so, why would he help this middle-aged man, who was a warrior of the Hall of Gods? Did they have some kind of secret deal, or was he actually a spy from the Hall of Gods that had been tasked with infiltrating the ethereal hall? There was also the possibility that the ethereal hall might have submitted to the Hall of Gods, but Zhongxian did not think that the possibility was too likely. After all, the ethereal hall had already acquired an entire God character, and there was nothing that could shake their position on the Forsaken Continent anymore. There was no reason the ethereal hall would collude with the Hall of Gods. Not to mention, Kong Shi was the current head of the ethereal hall. Zhongxian had thought of keeping Fu Chunzi alive in order to interrogate him, but he dared not take any chances when dealing with semi-divinity realm cultivators. If he did not kill them while he had the chance to, there was no knowing what they would pull from their pockets later on. He could not risk them getting away and revealing his other identities and trump cards. Knowing that he would not receive any answers just by pondering over the matters like this, Zhongxian turned toward the severely wounded copper-masked lady and clasped his fist. "Palace Master Du, I am the new head of the 7-star pavilion, Liu Yang. Allow me to treat your injuries." Fu Chunzi had dealt the other party a fatal blow, and if she was not treated quickly, she could very well lose her life. Zhongxian took out a jade bottle, but just as he was about to pass it over, the copper-masked lady suddenly thrust a sword right toward him. "What?" Zhongxian was taken aback. He hurriedly retreated, but the next instant, the copper-masked lady suddenly dissipated into a layer of mist, vanishing completely from sight. Knowing that the other party was executing some sort of movement art, Zhongxian shouted, "Palace Master Du?" However, it was already too late. The copper-masked lady was no longer around. "She is probably afraid that I would harm her as well." Zhongxian shook his head helplessly. Considering how the other party had just been backstabbed by Fu Chunzi, whom she was trying to protect, it was inevitable that she would be wary of him as well, even if he had just saved her from the 2 experts from the Hall of Gods. He might attempt to exploit her at a time like that. Given that this was a critical period for Starchaser Palace, she could not afford to take that risk. After all, the 7-star pavilion could not be said to be in friendly relations with Starchaser Palace, but he still took the risk to venture into the dangerous city of collapsed space to save her. Not to mention, he had even brought out a semi-divinity artifact and 4 semi-divinity realm beasts. It would be hard for her not to be skeptical. Just that, the altar was still there. She had put her life on the line in order to prevent the altar from falling into the hands of the other party. Why would she abandon it now? With a helpless sigh, Zhongxian walked over to the middle-aged man whom he had just killed, took his storage ring, and claimed possession of it. Only then did he finally walk over to take a closer look at the altar. The sky blue flame was still burning on it. It emanated an aura that made one tremble, almost as if it was forging a connection with a god from the firmament. This made Zhong Xian frown. Based on what he had seen thus far, the copper-masked lady was in the midst of conducting a ritual when she was attacked, and she had not had a chance to complete it yet. So, the ritual should have come to an immediate halt as soon as she fled. Yet, contrary to his expectations, the sky blue flame was still burning with fervor. This was as inexplicable as a flame still blazing on even though there was no longer any firewood for it to feed on. Extinguish. With a flick of his finger, Zhong Xian put out the sky blue flame. With his eye of insight, he examined the altar that was famed for being able to reach the gods, such that even the Hall of Gods would go to such lengths to acquire it. At first glance, it looked similar to the altar that Sovereign Chen Yong had used back then to summon a deity from the azure. It had a very old aura to it, indicating that it was an ancient artifact that had been passed down from generation to generation. Zhong Xian reached out to touch it. His eyes first widened a little before he helplessly burst into laughter. To think that they've all been fooled by that fellow. Zhong Xian chuckled as he shook his head. He wanted to see just what was so precious about the altar that Fu Chunzi and the middle-aged man would go to such lengths in order to acquire it, but to his amusement, the altar was actually a fake. It seemed like Fu Chunzi was not the only good actor after all. That being said, he had to admit that the altar was indeed really well made, such that he was unable to see through it with his eye of insight. If not for the Library of Heaven's Path, he might not have noticed the anomaly. Shark One waddled over and said, "Master, there's god blood smeared on the surface of the altar." Hearing those words, Zhong Xian took a closer look and saw a layer of faint crimson inscriptions on the surface. Vaguely, he could hear a faint hum echoing from the inscriptions that quivered his soul. Zhong Xian took out the crimson pendant and placed it close to the inscriptions. As expected, the pendant began to heat up in resonance with the inscriptions. "It's indeed god blood." Zhong Xian exhaled deeply. It was no wonder they were unable to see through the altar. Starchaser Palace had gone to the extent of using the invaluable god blood to create the effect of an ongoing ritual so as to confound their senses. But if this altar is fake, where's the real one? Zhong Xian frowned. Considering how Du Qingyuan had put her life on the line in order to distract the Hall of Gods from pursuing the real altar, where could the real one be hidden? Forget it. There's no point thinking about all of this right now. My priority at the moment should be finding Palace Master Du. She is my only clue to Luo Ruoxin. With a flick of his wrist, Zhong Xian stowed the altar and the corpses of the 2 semi-divinity realm experts into his storage ring. Then, together with the 4 semi-divinity realm beasts and his clones, he quickly darted in the direction that the copper-masked lady had disappeared in previously. Palace Master Du has sustained severe injuries, so it's unlikely that she will have been able to get too far. Help me search for her together, Zhong Xian instructed. Just like that, the group of 6 quickly combed the area. Due to the rubble lying all around the city of collapsed space, there were many spaces where one could hide. If Zhong Xian had to search the place all alone, who knew how long he would have to take? Considering the dangers lurking in the area, it would be wise for him to quickly get it over and done with so that he could leave the area. Master. Around 3 minutes later, the blackback tortoise came before him and pointed in a direction. The group headed in said direction, and through the eye of insight, Zhong Xian quickly noticed that something was amiss. There were no distinctive marks left in the area, but the spiritual energy there was considerably more concentrated than elsewhere. Not only so, the spiritual energy also felt as if it had been refined. She should be in the vicinity. It's likely that she's unable to control her strength from leaking out due to the severity of her injury, Zhong Xian said with a nod. The copper-masked lady had been struck in her vitals, causing her to be in a very precarious state. She had made sure to conceal her tracks properly, but she was still unable to control her cultivation properly in order to stop her zhenqi from leaking out of her body. Considering that the air of degeneration lingering in the area, her injuries would only continue to worsen. At this rate, she would really die. Thus, It was of paramount importance for him to find her as soon as possible so as to ensure her survival. Otherwise, everything would have been for naught. Zhong Xian quickly scanned the surroundings, but he was unable to find anything at all. Searching for her like this won't do. Since she's wounded, it's likely that she'll draw the surrounding air of degeneration to her. We should be tracing the movement of the air of degeneration instead. This, Zhong Xian waved to his clone and said, "Hey, come here." With a deep frown, his clone came over. "Stay very still and make sure not to move at all," Zhong Xian said as he took out the Tongzhang sword and pierced it right into his clone. Pooha! A gaping hole immediately appeared in his clone's chest. "I need you to walk around the area to test out the concentration gradient of the air of degeneration. The quicker the wound corrodes, the higher its concentration is," Zhong Xian said. Zhong Xian's clone was speechless. "The heck? You are the one who wants to find the concentration gradient of the air of degeneration, so shouldn't you be stabbing yourself? Even if you are afraid of pain, you have so many tamed beasts with you too. Why the hell are you stabbing me?" "Well, none of us have the ability to expel the air of degeneration from our bodies." Zhong Xian shrugged casually. "You are the only one who wields this amazing ability, so it goes without saying that this task should fall to you. This matter is completely decided based on our expertise and not because you pissed me off with your bragging earlier. I'm not the type of vindictive person who would settle personal grudges through such despicable means." The lips of Zhong Xian's clone twitched. "Well, you look exactly like the type of vindictive person who would settle personal grudges through despicable means to me right now. All I did was brag a little bit, right? Do you really need to go to such lengths?" You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.